Hey,
Hey,
can you hear me okay?
yeah, loud and clear.
Yeah? Is
Sounding
my
sounding nice.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on a RE20, so there's a little more low end. I'm assuming you can if you want to EQ that after the fact. I'm going real clean here.
No,
So,
I'll enhance it to make you super boomy and
I don't
sexy.
get to do this. Wait.
Oh, no, you're too big
I'm
for.
too big. I'm too
You
big
need
to do
a
this. Wow.
you
Yeah.
need a wider angle lens.
Yeah.
Sorry about the tech issue.
Oh, dude. Nah, it's fine. Yeah.
I always check beforehand. Riverside recognizes my interface. Audio is coming in nicely, but then when I come into the session, it just doesn't work anymore. So had to change my mic setup here. But
Yeah. I gotta say, I'm really impressed with Riverside. I didn't know anything about it before you turned me on to it, and it seems like a really great um, solution for all recording, screen. I don't know the ins and outs of everything it does, but it feels really solid to me. Like I did a quick test yesterday with it, and it seems like there's a lot of options and cool features of it. Do you really like it, right?
uh, it's been
Outside of the issues.
yeah. I mean the tech things are bothering me quite a bit.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, right now as I'm trying to drag your window over, this is super laggy for me.
Do you want to try and reboot or me reboot or something?
Yeah, probably me.
Okay.
If you're fine with that, I'll do that
Oh
real
yeah,
quick.
yeah.
All right, nice sound.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine.
I'm discovering goofiness with pitch bent sources with this new instrument that we're um, working on, which is it's a pseudo sequel to Oblivion, but it's not at all what Oblivion was. The the code name, just so so I'll give you a little tiny the 30-second the cliff note. The working title, which will change. We haven't come up with the final name yet, but the working title is Aftermath. So Oblivion is the nuclear strike, right? The tough, super aggressive instrument, and this is the dystopian after the bomb drops. This is the
The
fallout.
the fallout. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a much more subdued nature to this, but it has this edginess as well. So it's almost like a dystopian future. Like it's got the same kind of elements, but they're not all on 11. There's this a subtlety to the content. It's very hybrid, very much in line with what Oblivion offered, but it's kind of like the more of an atmospheric undertone, glue, as opposed to the really heavy, hard punching, heavy hitting stuff. So yeah, so
Nice.
that's what we're working on. So it's content locked finally. Sorry about the delays. It was just like we'll get into it when we're talking about project development and timelines and shifting timelines and what happens when you think something's going the way it should, and then it's like, oh wait, let's reevaluate this, and maybe there's a better way to do something. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
But we're in snapshot land now, which is the final stage of production. So it's good.
Nice. Can't
Yeah.
wait.
Are things better now on your end, or are you?
Yeah, it's actually responsive now. Actually, now I don't hear an echo anymore of myself, but previously I could. But I don't hear anything now, so we're good to go.
Okay.
Cool.
Great.
Awesome.
So we can make sure to not step on each other's toes when we're talking. Hopefully, we won't be arguing, right? So we won't both be yelling at each other.
Hopefully
least.
not.
Yeah.
But even if we are, it's fine. I mean,
is my lighting okay? Everything looks good for you
Yeah.
on my end?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, looks nice. Your studio is a bit nicer than mine. I mean, understandably.
Yeah.
Nice API. Is that what is it called? The box?
The box
or?
2. Yeah, the box 2.
Oh, there's a 2. I
Yeah.
only knew
Well,
about
the
one.
original box was 16 channels, but it only had 4 inputs, and this one has 8, which is nice if you're doing larger format recording, which we oftentimes do. So if you had like 4 players and you wanted to get close mic'd on each of the players, you could have 4 discrete inputs. Or sorry, if you had 8 players, you could do, if you have 4 players, you could do 4 close, and then you could have overheads, and then you could have rooms, and all of a sudden you've got 8 mic inputs, and you're good to record that way. So it's for the budget that you would spend on the box, it's a gold mine, because you get the analog juiciness of a large format console in a really cohesive tight package. And they're great workhorses. We were guinea pigs for the first ones, but I'm sure we'll be going over this again when it comes to, yeah. So do you want to start rolling? Are we
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go. How did you end up choosing API over, say, some other options? Is it the sound? Is it like, because I find that APIs are sort of sharper, punchier, like they have this sort of edge to them, like in a good way, a bit of that. So
and
why did you?
They have good headroom. You can push them pretty hard, and you won't get the top out, the distortion. I mean, that's a large analog consoles are great about that. I think of the Studer, the 24-inch or 2-inch 24 track, where you could really push the tape hard and it wouldn't distort the same way. Much like this, there's something about the analog circuitry of the API that Neil is more the engineer than I am, and he was kind of leading the charge on API. We'd worked with a bunch of other. We used Dangerous, the 2-bus. We used Apollo for a long time for the digital I/O stuff, and now we're on the Burl mothership systems, which are like, I think those are industry standard at this point. Burl is just amazing, like really modular in terms of how you can set up your studio and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it kind of fits the Heavyocity sound. Like if I had to guess, like which of the analog typical, styles would you go for? Like Neve API or, something else, SSL?
Yeah. I would say
it probably fits you pretty well.
And the budget, economically, it's a much better option. It's like when we bought the original boxes, like I think my serial number was like 00012. We were literally guinea pigs for the first run of the boxes. So we did have some like hiccups and some growing pains getting acclimated, and which was fine, because they were API has been great. They were really responsive, helping us through small issues here and there, but for the most part, knock on wood, they've been super, super fantastic in terms of just the quality and the caliber of the production that we could do inside of the box, literally and figuratively, in the technologically advanced computer age of recording and producing, that sort of thing. So it's great for a small studio, obviously. It's not like taking up 10 by 12 feet of your room. It's a very economical footprint, which is the real great part about it. So
yeah, cool. Well, I mean, first of all, again, I wanted to start by saying thanks for doing this. It's for those who are watching or listening. I have had the pleasure of getting to know you a fair bit over a number of calls over the years now, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Time goes
I wanted to start off by doing this, but we can't fan out, so I could give you a gun show, right? There we go. There we go. Yeah.
I'm actually trying to get some of this back, because a lot of it has been going.
There's still a lot there.
Yeah, but this is only like very recent.
Yeah, I'm not messing with you in a dark alley, Markus. So yeah, you still got it going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, fighting takes different skills.
It does. Yeah, it's not all about it's this muscle that you need, right?
Didn't
you say that muscle you used to walk away from the fight. That's how I like to look at it. Yeah.
Do I remember correctly that you said, did you do martial arts at some point?
I did. I grew up 2 doors away from the neighborhood bully, and he kept on terrorizing all my childhood friends and I. We would get off the bus, and he'd be hiding behind this big, huge rock, and we knew he was there, and we'd start running towards our house, and he would chase us down, and he was such a menace. And he was 2 years older than us. And he had probably, 4 or 5 inches on me. I was a small kid, and he had 40, 50 pounds on me. He just would torment me. And I finally just told my parents, hey, I need to learn to defend myself, because parents back in these days, the boomer generation of raising kids is like, you guys figure it out on your own, and figuring it out wasn't working, because I was coming home with bloody noses, a separated shoulder. I was really getting my rear end kicked, and I finally just said, I want to take karate lessons. And I ended up, long story short, I spent about 6.5 years studying. I studied Kempo, and then I got into a Shotokan hardstyle form of karate, and I was doing tournament competition, kumite as they call it, tournament sparring, and I was doing kata competitions, and I was really into it. And I managed to alleviate the issue of the bully by learning to defend myself, and he finally stopped tormenting me one day when I got the courage to stand up to him, and so yeah, that was a long time ago, but I learned a lot of valuable things through the several senseis that I had. They taught me a lot of good life lessons about not just defending yourself, but how to deal with people in general, because the best way to get out of a situation is not to have it end physically. They always say the best fight ends without a punch. So
yeah. Well,
anyway.
It seems like I'm probably the one who doesn't want to end up in a dark alley with you, because I don't have martial arts training. Of course, size can help, but and
you and
strength,
I'd be on the same side in the dark alley. How's that?
Hopefully, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. That's it. That's one of the unfortunate truths about life, that there are a lot of nasty people out there, and sometimes they only understand the language that they themselves try to use, and then you just have to take care of it, even if that's not the way you wish it went down. But it's
No
not
question.
not a nice world out there.
Yeah. Being it's September 12th, and it's a solemn time for myself personally, because September 11th is a really it's a very sacred day for a lot of people who were there directly or indirectly for the September 11th attacks, and every year I reflect on it and think about how how can we get to this place where we can't get along, and it comes to this, and 24 years later, here we are, we can't get along, and it's like I don't know. I'm lost in terms of solutions. My solution is for myself to try and wake up each morning and figure out how I can be a better person and be a good husband and father, be a good friend, good partner to the people I work with. And it doesn't solve the world's problems, but if we all chipped in a little bit to figure out how we could be better versions of ourselves, and not so driven by our own will and our own having to be right. More recently in my life, I've come to the conclusion that sometimes it's okay to be wrong. In some ways that's right to be wrong, because it's not worth the conflict. It's not worth the back and forth and the arguments and all of that. So, yeah, crazy times we're living in, and I'm just taking it one day at a time, because you can only do so much, and then you have to just make sure that you're keeping your lane clean, and the rest of it will work itself out.
Yeah, I often reference Gandalf on this podcast out of all the people, but what you said about what Gandalf says is that the small everyday deeds of normal people, kind deeds, nice things that you do for other people are what actually keep darkness at bay. And I think it's actually that's not a direct quote, obviously, but a rough
Okay.
estimation, but I find it to be very true because a lot of people walk around with this ambient resentment and anxiety and bitterness. And it can take just one person, a random person, um, doing something nice for you to go like, okay, that's interesting. And why did they do that for me? And it shows how little it actually takes to like defeat, not necessarily defeat the darkness, but push it further away. Because we have all these stories and ideas of the bad people out there and who they are and what they're like. And then
Mm-hmm.
one day we can walk on the street and somebody who looks like that does something nice for us. And we go like, oh, okay, I don't know what I'm actually talking about or thinking about. So I think if we showed more of that to one another, I think that would really dissipate a lot of the ambient bitterness that we carry as we go through life, and we go through different negative experiences, and then we abstract certain parts of it and think that, oh, it applies to that and that and that person, when the truth is really not that at all.
Absolutely. I mean, it brings up the cliche, never judge a book by its cover. I know guys that have sleeves, tattoos, and they are the sweetest human beings. Yet, my mom, who's a 84-year-old and losing her mind, she's like, "Oh my gosh, she's got tattoos." It's like, Mom, he's a really nice person. So the whole idea of preconceived, uh, judgmental disposition is something that it's born out of fear, really. People don't have the ability to understand that you just have to worry about yourself and then be good to others, and don't don't form your opinions until they're presented to you in the way that somebody treats you. Don't let your seeing somebody in a certain light because you saw something on television, dictate how you're going to perceive people in real life. It's so prevalent, and we're trying to progress in society to be more tolerant and accepting, and yet I feel like we're stuck in a whirlpool that's U-turning our society. And I'm not pointing fingers or blaming any single person, but I think collectively as a world, I feel like there's just this polarizing nature to anything that you can bring up. People find a reason to argue about whatever it is, and getting back to the point of how, like, you can be walking down the street and look at somebody coming the other direction, and you immediately judge them just based upon their appearance. It's just a natural instinct. And sometimes it's warranted, other times it's not. But how are we supposed to understand the difference between, okay, I just should trust everybody? You have to have a certain level of, you have to have your guard up in the world. That goes without saying, but there's a difference between having your guard up and also having a tolerance and acceptance of people when you have the ability to behave in an appropriate way. And I think that that's lost on a lot of people. I think that um, we're just in a different place in terms of, uh, if you don't agree with me, f you, you're the enemy. And I have a lot of friends who don't see things the way I see them. They have a different moral compass. They're wonderful people. I don't. Sometimes I wonder, like, why do they think that? Well, it's not for me to uh, try and beat them up for it. If they really truly believe it, and it doesn't interfere with my relationship with them, then I'm going to let it go. There are some things which I won't let go, and then I will appropriately, um, I will manage my relationships in that capacity. I have a very specific moral compass that, I tend to be very accepting of people, um, no matter who they are. And there are people out there who are, I hate to say it, but they're a little more narrowly focused in who they are willing to accept as equals in their lives. And that's not my problem. That's their problem. So, um, without saying anything more, I think, again, tolerance and acceptance goes a long way in the world. And it starts with accepting yourself for who you are and making sure that you're honest with yourself about it, you know?
Mm. Yeah. And I think what's really prevalent today is that a lot of people think that ideas or thoughts in themselves are somehow existentially threatening to them. Like people take an idea and then they sort of, a lot of satellite connotations attached to that idea. So if they hear me say a word, they think I automatically stand for 10 or 20 other things, which automatically don't necessarily relate to the original thing at all. But today it seems like a lot of people think that when you say X, it also means Y and Z. When you might actually be just trying to talk about X. And yeah, what you also said, I think we could get quite far in trying to fix this situation if we just gave people some very basic respect. Like, first of all, understanding that the person you're talking to, no matter how reprehensible or even malicious they might seem to you, of course there are limits to this, but they're still people. You know, even the most horrible people that the world has ever seen, who have, you know, done actions that have led to the death of millions of people, those were still people. And I'm not saying that in the sense that you should, you know, give them tremendous empathy or justify what they did. But it's like you said, it's when you dehumanize other people, you make it about our team versus their team. Like when you dehumanize someone, you are basically saying that they don't have the same rights as I do if I view myself as a human being. And I think that happens extremely easily today, the dehumanization, which is really dangerous, because I think actually most people who do that don't actually want that. If they cross the line and they do something stupid and they hurt somebody, they're like, oh shit, that's not what I actually wanted to do. And I think in today's environment, so many people are so protected and so privileged and live in such comfort that they've never had to actually answer answer for their actions. So you know, talk is cheap, but it's yeah, the price can actually be quite heavy on the other side.
Yes. Yeah. Just circling it back. I was just thinking this morning when I was driving in, and one of the things I often, one of the things I repeat to myself is like, honesty leads to ownership. It also leads to accountability and responsibility. And I think one of the biggest breakdowns is we as humans are stuck in this rut of lacking the ability to really hone in on our true issues of being honest with ourselves, and that leads to all of these other problems. And you know, all the things I've been through in the past 18 months, closer to 2 years now, allowed me to really reflect on my life and how I could better myself just in the midst of all these life events occurring to myself and people around me. And it really was a great opportunity. And one thing I can say, you know, I can't change the world, but I can change myself. And that's really a profound thing for everybody to take in and reflect on. If everybody could actually think about like looking in the mirror every day and, you know, realize that what they're looking at, that's really the only problem that they're going to have on on that day. You know, we're our own worst enemy, and we create the problems that we have for ourselves. When you start to realize that, and I'm no guru, I don't have all the answers, but you know, when you can reflect on the fact that, you know, we have to take responsibility for our actions and how we live, and the failure to do that is what leads to what's happening in the world today. And so I like to try and start on a more micro level with my own self, again, uh, being a better person. I'm a husband and a father and a business partner, a friend, a colleague, an acquaintance, and a stranger. When you're nice to strangers, things go a lot better, period. When you go into a pharmacy to buy something and you approach the person helping you check out, assuming there's a person helping you check out and it's not one of those auto checkout things, which is where we're all going. You give them a smile and say, "How's your day going?" Half the people will look at you like, "Wait, is he really being nice to me?" And the other half will be like, big smile. You're doing, it's like you said, Marcus, those little things that you do. So, and bringing it back to the larger picture, it's like, imagine a world where we're all compassionate and we care about each other, and our differences don't necessarily divide us, but they allow us to be curious and investigate what the differences are without resorting to these ultimatum kind of conflicts, which are obviously deadly in today's modern society that we're living in. So, um, in some ways, it's really sad. In other ways, it's a call to action for us to be better. Start at home and then work your way out. Clean your own house and then try and help others to clean theirs in any way you can by being a good person. That's.
Yeah.
I know it's a rah. Give me the pom poms. I don't care. Like, things go better in your life when you're nice to people. That's a fact. So,
Yeah.
and we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I have really, yesterday I had some moments, it was a rough day at home, and like, by the end of the day, I got home and really turned it around because I realized, like, let's improve how this day started by finishing it up the right way. Um, we're all works in progress. So,
Yeah. Amen. But yeah, it's like, I think, again, we could fix probably most of our issues if we did what you said, if we focused on trying to fix ourselves. But of course, that's extremely difficult to do. Takes a lot of humility, takes you managing your ego and saying that, I messed up, I've made mistakes. A lot of people aren't not willing to do that, unfortunately. But I think if we did that, the world would look very different because, like you said, the problems in the world come from people. And like you said, we create a lot of our own issues, or we certainly make them worse in many cases. And it's very interesting to think that you can somehow change the world, but you can't even change yourself. I don't follow that logic at all because, like, it's very difficult to change yourself, but you can do it. It's manageable, but you can't even manage that. So how do you think you're going to change the world? Which, you can't even do it with yourself, and you have not complete control of yourself, but you have the most control over yourself than you'll ever have over anybody else.
That's
So
that's the inherent problem, is that power corrupts, and that's where it begins and ends. I won't go too much into that, but it's just, I think people get a taste of authority and power, and I think that there's a level of I don't know, a dysfunctional, just inherently flawed issues that arise once you get that. It's almost like an intoxicating feeling of being powerful, and it turns you into a person that you shouldn't be. That stems in, or that kind of derails into the aspects of being narcissistic and completely ego driven and imposing your will, all of those things. And I think that's a telltale sign of some of the issues on the larger scale of our societies, and how our world is being ruled. And again, I'm but one little tiny person in this world, and it's enough for me to just keep my own life in check and keep things solid on my own playing field. And I wish I could, snap my fingers or raise a Harry Potter wand that I got from Universal Studios and just make it all better. But yeah, I can't do that. So that's not the lane that I'm in at this point, which is unfortunate. And I wish I could be in that lane, but I'm not. So
You chose the wrong profession for that.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So, I mean, for those who are watching or listening and don't know who you are, is the definition a co-founder of Heavyocity? Yes.
That's correct. Yes.
Correct.
Co-founder.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And if you don't know Heavyocity, you clearly don't write music with sample libraries, because if you do, you've probably heard of Heavyocity. But yeah, you're a library development company. Is that the definition you would use?
Yes. Technically, if you want to be fancy about it, we're software developers. We do develop, we've developed tech for plugin architecture, but we do license technology from a third party to develop our virtual instruments, as we call them. And we do employ our own custom scripting, which allows us to create a very unique working environment for the end user. So technically, we develop a very robust platform in which we present our sampled source material in the instruments in a technical language,
technical description. Yeah.
The technical speak, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, going back to your the very origin story of Dave, where were you born?
So I was born in Northern California. I was born in San Francisco, and I'm a California native, as they call us. I spent a majority of my childhood in Northern California. I was lived about a year in San Francisco. I was born in 1967, making me 58, I believe. And right after I was born, my father, who was in the Army at the time, because of the Vietnam conflict, he got stationed in Newport News, Virginia. And so I lived in Virginia for a couple of years. And upon the end of the Vietnam conflict, my father moved us back across the country to Marin County in Northern California, to a city called Corte Madera, where we lived for a few years. My father worked in the city, and then a couple years later, he moved us further north up to Sonoma County, and that's where I spent a majority of my childhood, in Santa Rosa, which is right in the middle of Sonoma County and wine country there, and that's where I spent a majority of my childhood.
Nice. And what did you? Well, you mentioned what your dad was doing, but
yeah,
did they?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. My father was a physician, and he worked in the city, and while we were in Corte Madera, and then he got an opportunity to become a attending physician at two of the hospitals in Santa Rosa. So that's when we moved up to Sonoma County, and that's where I spent the rest of my youth. And that's where my parents lived there for 50 some odd years. My father just passed actually last year, and we moved my mom closer to my sister, who's still on the West Coast. But long story longer. My dad was a physician, and my mom actually was a artist, mainly plein air artist. She liked to paint on locations and do a lot of landscapes. And both my parents were Stanford graduates, and that's where they met, Stanford in Palo Alto. And I think growing up, there was a lot of both the left and the right brain in the house. My dad was very more, I guess, left brain, being very precision person, and my mom was, we called her the space shot. You know, she she was an interesting mom. She had moments where it's like, oh my gosh, is that my mom? But yeah, so yeah, that was childhood in Northern California. You know,
Do you have the craziest example?
yeah. My mom once filled her tank with gas and paid for the gas and forgot to take the gas pump out of her car before she drove away and pulled the gas pump out of the car. Just yeah, all sorts of things. My mom was a loving mom. My parents were boomer generation, so things were a lot different for children back in those days. I think in a lot of ways I was raised, I guess, what do they say? Raised by wolves. Parents didn't have a lot of oversight in what their kids did until they did something really wrong. And then, like the beauty of not having that much oversight is like you could push the boundaries and do a lot of things and make mistakes, but then sometimes the repercussions for the mistakes were really swift and unpleasant. And
What
I
are
don't want,
your
yeah,
thoughts on that looking back now? And you obviously you have kids now and looking at the world now and
yeah.
comparing the times now to when you were growing up. What are like the perks and the negatives?
So the biggest difference between now and then, there's a few really, really massive differences. The biggest difference is the the age of technology we live in today and what that presents both as a positive and a negative for a parent having children. You have to make sure your kids are you know you have to monitor what your kids are doing, whether it's on an iPad or watching TV, anything today, because there's just so much opportunity for them to see the wrong thing at the wrong time, and there's really no regulation to what they can see. It's all unchecked. You have to be the floodgate for what they consume, and that can be very challenging because your kids will go over to their friend's house, and what do their friends' parents do? And it's that is to me one of the biggest challenges as a parent. 'Cause my son is 10 years old, and he's at that age where he's curious about a lot of things. But the other big difference, when you remove the technology, my life as a kid was just get home, change my clothes. If I didn't have homework, I'd go run out and play with my friends, and we would run around in the forest and do things that were very self-generated instead of being, kids today. It's a whole different level of interaction. Kids are, my son's 10 and he has an iWatch now, and he talks to his friends on his iWatch, and like we had to go. They still knock on doors in my neighborhood. They still run over to each other's houses, which is great. It's a reminder of my past. But kids today just, they're, if you allow them, they will become addicted to the screens, just like a lot of us adults are. And the other thing, I feel as though that there's a lack of understanding about what a parent is versus what a child is, and the hierarchy of authority in a child's life and understanding the position in the family. And this is not me being a military sergeant. This is like me saying, when you set a child up to just expect everything and be really entitled, that's a it's a dangerous proposition, because the real world, when you walk out into it, unless you have all the connections and somebody like snowplows your path in front of you in the real world, you're going to be met with a lot of adversity. And I see a lot of kids who tend to have the pathway cleared continuously. And there are instances where that's really important. You want to protect your child, but you also want to allow them to learn from making the mistakes that will really help them to grow. Um, there's a fine line between being an overbearing parent and being a parent that just doesn't care and lets their kid do anything, right? So the biggest difference for me is like, how do I keep my kid safe, give him the independence, and let him have that independence in a way that's not going to corrupt him. He's already losing some of his innocence just by default. You know, he has a lot of friends who have older brothers, and their older brothers are really a bad influence on a younger brother. I'll tell you that right now, because when I was growing up, I had an older sister, and so like I didn't have any of the older brother um, things in my house. I was left to my own devices, and when I would go over to my friend's house, older brothers would like introduce me to things that I was like, oh wow, I didn't know about that or that. And so my son does like, you know, he does get exposed to things, and sometimes he'll say something, and I'll be like, where did you learn that? You know, and he's oh da 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 told me, and I'm like, okay. And I usually let things go, but yeah, so. Uh, I don't. I think the only other thing I'll say about children today versus when I was growing up, I couldn't care less about, I don't know, 75% of the things that younger adults or teens into like coming of age kids are far more informed about what's going on in the world, and that's a very positive thing for me to see. I didn't know which way was up when I was 18 years old. I was like, I'm going to college, I guess, and I'm going to try and make a way in the world. And I didn't even think about all the real things going on in the world and the conflict and you know, social issues and everything else. Even though I grew up in a very progressive community where I knew um, at a very early age about tolerance and acceptance, and I feel very fortunate that I grew up in a household that allowed me to understand these things. Whereas I had friends whose parents were very, very close-minded, and I just had to keep my mouth shut around certain parents, and it was really like strange for me. But um, it's nice to see kids today being a little more, at least in where I live, they have an understanding of diversity and just a general clue about how the world really is today. We're not a homogenized world. We're a very diverse world, and you know, that's the one thing that I appreciate, and at least the kids that um, that I come into contact with. You know, in my circle, and I would say in other circles that I know. So,
And what were you like as a kid? Because now, sort of, you are um, obviously creative, but obviously um, structured, and you obviously deal with technology a
mhm,
fair bit. So,
yeah.
you know, having that technical side, but also that creative side. So, I would like to understand, like, what is your, I guess, natural temperament? Like, were you a shy kid? Were you a creative kid? Or what were you like back then?
Um, that's a really good question, and I gave it some thought in terms of just growing up. Um, I was a little bit shy, but I was also a kid who went out and did the things that I was supposed to do, meaning I didn't fight the program, if I can call it that. Like, I was supposed to get on a bus and go to first grade, even though I didn't know where my bus was going. I had to follow my sister. Like, I towed the line. I played soccer. I did all these, you know, my parents steered me into all these things. I started taking classical piano lessons when I was 5 years old. And I did all these things because like, I was I guess um, responsive and submissive to my parents, and they made sure that I was doing the things I needed to do. So when I started to develop my own sensibilities and my own like my own personality, I realized, you know, like I was uh, I was somewhat of a joker. I like to be a little bit of a class clown and screw around, and my friends and I would get into some trouble and to be disruptive, you know, typical boy stuff. But as the years progressed and I got beat up by the bully and started doing martial arts, I developed a tougher edge to my existence, and that really, like, as I grew, it manifested itself in a more, I guess, disruptive way, and I traded in, like, little pranks for bigger pranks and getting in trouble and doing things that you shouldn't be doing, like in junior high school, lighting a pack of firecrackers during an assembly in the auditorium when there's 300 people in there, and, doing something in high school that I don't really wanna repeat, but, that got me suspended for an entire week, and I was a mischievous kid, and that was more because I think my parents weren't really there that much, for my sister and I. They were kinda in their own world, and we just were left to our own devices, like I said before, and I had to just find my way and figure a lot of things out, and a lot of times I would make some really bad decisions that weren't based on any logical or rational judgment, and, I would find out the hard way, and never ended up behind bars, fortunately. Never got into really serious trouble, but I definitely had my fair share of, you know, um, mischievous times as a kid. But overall, I was a good kid. I would say I was a caring kid. I had a good stable of friends. I had, people who I thought I could really, count on as my friends, and those changed over the years. So I had, in some ways a very normal childhood, in other ways not so normal, just things that went on at home that just were not great, and just every family, looks like the Cleavers from the outside, and then from Leave It to Beaver. I don't know if you ever saw that show. It's like the perfect family with the house and the white picket fence and the two kids, and the dog in the yard, and it's never quite what it appears, right? So there was things that went on at home that weren't great, that kind of caused me to be a bit rebellious out in the world, and um, you know kind of stuck with me through my life, and also enabled me to become a very tenacious and very hungry person to um, succeed, and at all costs, find a way to kick and scratch and claw my way to achieve something that was in front of me, whether it's um, career based or personal based, or I will say that the one thing my father really instilled in me was a work ethic. He put a shovel in my hands when I was 4 years old and made me shovel a bunch of manure into wheelbarrows in Corte Madera, while he would, like, spread it around the backyard. And I was mowing the lawn at, I think, 8 years old in Santa Rosa. I was instilled a really good work ethic, and I think in some ways that really made me a industrious person, and what ultimately led to me being, um, you know, the kind of person I am today, that's been, you know, uh, I've been this way for such a long time, and I'm kinda tired being this way, because I've been so tenacious and, like, fought so hard to get where I am, and having that drive and the work ethic. Sometimes you wanna slow down and relax for a bit, but that's really difficult when you feel like, you're on the, like, little push cart on the railroad tracks and the train's coming right behind you. It's like, you gotta keep going to get to that next, station depot so the train doesn't hit you, kinda thing. So, not sure if I'm
Yeah,
explaining exactly the kinda kid I was, but just giving a little insight as to my kind of mind as a kid and who I was growing up.
sure. Yeah, I remember in a previous conversation we had, you touched on the kind of rougher side, or the difficulties or tough things you had when you were growing up.
Yeah.
Was there anything sort of beyond the bullies and the stuff at home? Was there something sort of that we're missing from that picture? Something that
Yeah, there's
was
some really
especially difficult?
yeah. There's some really personal stuff that happened that I don't wanna go too much into detail about, but things that, nobody should have to go through. And those were, um, those those moments in my life, I really, for the longest time, buried and put in, kinda compartmentalized in my life, because they were very confusing times that these things happened, and I was able to put them in their place and kind of lay them to rest for a long, long time in my life, and then eventually, they came back up, and I've had to deal with those things over a period of time, and it's anything in life that you go through as a child. We don't realize what happens as children, the kind of pain that we go through as children when things are not perfect. Nothing's ever perfect growing up. Anybody who says they had the perfect childhood, it's like, remember we started this conversation about being honest? It's like nobody's life is perfect, But a lot of what happened in my childhood that was born out of the dysfunctional family unit was a driving force in my mindset of survival at all costs and figuring out a way to make it through. Because once I, not to bounce around, but once I got out of music school, I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, that was it. Like I came home, I was home for 6 weeks, and then I was out the door. I never came back. I only came back home to just get a gig, and then I was gone. So, yeah, a lot of what happens, what do they say? The things that happen to you, they either, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and a lot of things from my childhood made me a really strong person, including Scott Brewster was the bully's name who used to beat me up, and it was, even though I have a lot of resentment towards that guy, he instilled in me the ability to fight for myself and defend myself in a way that was constructive through my training that I did, and so you have to find a way to take those negatives and make the positives out of them. Just like the things, the abuses that I suffered when I was young, and didn't really understand at the time, and then they ended up, kind of manifesting themselves inside of me through the years, and made myself a version of myself that I would say I didn't deserve to be, but I was, because that's just how things went. And I'm happy to say now, I have a much different situation than I did, say, 10 years ago. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. So when did music come into the picture?
Music, oh my goodness. So I mentioned I started classical piano lessons at 5. I played because my father was a very accomplished pianist himself. We had a 9D Steinway 9D 19th century in the living room. So I got to grow up playing on it wasn't the best action for a Steinway, but it was a beautiful piano, and I took lessons for about 5 years, and I didn't like taking piano lessons. I was like, this is like scales and Czerny and Hannon and all the typical things you do in classical piano lessons. And my teacher, Mrs. Malpuss was her name. She's the nicest lady. She's the nicest lady, and she was really great. And I would practice a half hour a day, and then it was 45 minutes. And after 5 years of that, I was like, I had not spent 10 minutes at the piano without staring at a sheet of music or something on with staffs and notes. And I went in and I told my mom, I said, Mom, I don't like piano lessons. These suck. This is terrible. And my mom said, well, if your dad says that you don't have to take piano lessons, then fine. You don't have to take piano lessons. And so I had got the courage up. I was like, Dad, I'm not really enjoying piano lessons. I'm just not. And he's like, okay. He let me quit taking piano lessons after 5 years. I was like, great.
Oh, I thought he was going to say like, okay, well, I don't care that you don't like it. You're still doing it.
He let me quit. And
wow.
And about I don't know, 6 months later, 7 months later, whatever it was, I actually sat down at the piano with nothing in front of me. I sat down because I wanted to sit down, not because I had to practice, not because that was the routine. And I put my hands on the keys, and first chord I played, which is the first chord everybody learns, I played a C major chord. And I was like, wow. And then I went up one scale degree, and I played a D minor chord. I'm like, oh, cool. And for some reason I went down, I didn't remember it like it was yesterday. I went down to a B flat major chord. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And then I went back to the C. And I started riffing on that progression of a C to a D minor to a B flat major, C. And I started doing something rhythmic with it. And after about 5 minutes of just playing this thing over and over again, I realized I was writing music. And that was it. And I started noodling and doing, and like really taking some of the chops I'd learned through the scale exercises, the modal scales, learning the circle of fifths, all the baseline things, the concrete that's poured in the musical foundation for you to become competent with theory if you end up going that road of understanding it. A lot of people just are repertoire players. They don't understand what theory really is, the mathematics of music, So I went back to my parents, like literally after a month, I got the courage up again. I said, I want to start taking piano lessons again, but I want to take from somebody who's going to teach me to play and not read from a page. And they found a teacher who would actually allow me to bring in songs that I liked and start learning them. And that was a amazing opportunity. So, and this, I was actually it was more like a year or so after I'd done that. I'm getting the dates a little screwed up here. I think I was about 12 at that point in time. I was a little bit older, and I realized oh, wow, this is really cool. And, so I started learning theory, and just learning to play by ear and learning songs and things like that. And
do you remember any of the songs that you took to the teacher and wanted to play?
Yeah, there was a lot of old Genesis that I liked.
Nice.
God, trying to think. There was old. The classics, some Elton John songs. My parents were really into the Beatles, Chicago, Elton John, the staples of the I guess the more yacht rocky artists of that time. I don't know, more they were kind of vanilla music fans. Billy Joel. They weren't into the stuff I discovered when I was in junior high and more into high school, the heavier stuff. I wish they would have been into Black Sabbath and Hendrix and Cream and all the Led Zeppelins. And those were, believe it or not, the bully down the street, Scott Brewster, introduced me to those. Because when Scott wasn't beating me up, he was the older brother of one of my buddies, actually, believe it or not. So that's the weird dynamic there that I won't even get into. Yeah, so I would take these songs and I would learn to play them, and it really made me realize, wow, I can play really cool music, and it's not just stuff that none of my friends wants to hear. I would play a cool, what is it, Candle in the Wind, or simple songs that people would recognize. And then a little later on, through junior high school into high school, I got some friends who were also musicians, and we ended up forming our first band in my sophomore year of high school.
What was it called?
It's a silly name because
that's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
it always is.
So not to be confused with a different name, the band was named after the singer, but we called ourselves Mike Sales and the Heartbreakers. Not like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Mike Sales and the Heartbreakers. And the reason why we call it the Heartbreakers is because we were playing classic oldies, like 60s and 70s, old school. We played Elvis Presley, like old Rolling Stones. We played Doors. We played like a lot of one-hit wonders like Good Lovin', Louie Louie, Under the Boardwalk. We had like 4 sets worth of these like old school rock and roll tunes, and we started jamming them because this kid could really sing. He's in Florida now. He's still singing and playing his guitar on the beach, believe it or not. Mike Sales, if you look him up, you'll find him. So 10th grade, I'm 15 years old, and my best friend at the time, his name's Chris. He was playing bass in the band. Scott was on guitar. Jeff was on drums, and Mike was the singer. And just a side note, I recently had my 40th high school reunion, and I saw everyone but Mike, the singer from the band, and we all got together and hung out for a kind of our own little reunion, just hanging out, reminiscing about the old days. But back to the story of our trajectory, we started our illustrious career. We got an opportunity to play at Chuck E. Cheese Pizza Time Theater. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's like a pizza restaurant with like all sorts of games, and they have this whole like this cabaret, this stage with all these animatronic characters, and so we would set up on the stage, and we did 3 sets from it was like 5:30 to 8. And it was Wednesday nights from 5:30 to 8, and we got paid peanuts. We got like $20 a person, and they gave us free pizza and soda pop and all of the game tokens we wanted. So we were getting paid like, it was such a goofy situation. But that was my first exposure to live performance, and it was like we were in heaven, because like, holy smokes, like, and there was a lot of people. Like Wednesday nights, like it was a big night. Like you'd have like 50 people in the room, and it wasn't that big of a room, but we used to joke about it. We had we said we had 8-year-old groupies and their moms. Like everybody was super young, and then their moms would be in the back watching, and the kids would be up front, and it was like, it was a very innocent time for us as musicians, and it was just really fun. And that was the beginning of my, I guess, local gigging around the circuit of Santa Rosa and Sonoma County, because we happened to be approached by a guy who owned a bar and grill that had a live music venue in the establishment, and he just happened to see us a Wednesday night because his son was having a birthday at Chuck E. Cheese. He saw us playing. He said, "Are you guys playing anywhere out?" And we were like, "No, this is it." And he offered us an opportunity to play at his establishment, and we ended up doing a Sunday night there, and did phenomenally well, did really great. And he ended up booking us Sundays through the summer. And from there, it just started to snowball, because he knew like 4 or 5 other guys with actual live venues that would do cover bands pretty much 7 nights a week. So we ended up playing in about 5 or 6 different places that summer with a band where we're all underaged, and we were all discovering what it meant to consume alcohol and all that. And the running joke was that we would have to leave between sets to go out of most of these places we played, because they were 21 and over, and all the oldest person in our band was 16. So we would go out. I know this is like, it's a good thing my parents aren't watching this, because it's one of these things I'm not that proud of, but we would go out in the parking lot between sets, and one of the band members' older brothers was 21, and he would buy us a little something to consume in the parking lot. Just like true seasoned musicians, we started young, and it was not something I'm proud of, but it was a funny part of the story, as I call it. And it was our wonder years as musicians and as kids, and we were just like the fact that we had this crazy existence. And so through high school, I not only had that one band, but we started another band which was a top 40 band we called it Midnight Shift. And that we played all the hits from like the early to, and that which turned into mid 80s into my college years. I would come back in the summers and we would still gig around the circuit in Santa Rosa when live music used to be a huge thing in a lot of places, and it's not so much anymore. It still is in certain regions and certain cities, but live music where I grew up is not what it was when I grew up. You know, all of these venues are long gone, and so yeah, I've been very long-winded about that portion of my life. That's what really, you know, when I was gigging and playing live and never had a normal summer job throughout high school because I was gigging. I was making, you know, sometimes $400 or $500 a week. And I was 16, 17 years old playing in 2 different bands that were playing around Santa Rosa. And it was like pretty cool. Cause all of our other friends were working in shoe stores or bussing tables or, you know, working for landscaping companies. And so that was, you know, that's what gave me the real bug of like, wow, I love music. You know, this is like great. And we were just having a great time. So yeah, that's.
Did you, somewhere in there, did you always know that you wanted to do music, like more professionally, or was it somewhere in there that you started to think about, like I'm making $400 or $500 here and there. Could this be like a viable career path?
You know, that's a really great question, Markus. And the initial answer is no. That's not the way you're supposed to. Your life trajectory is supposed to go. You know, rock stars that you look at growing up they're untouchable. You know, you're never going to be that, right? Or never be a composer or this or that. You're supposed to go to college and get a real job, right? That's what I thought. So when I left for college, you know, still very into music, and because my father was in the medical industry, I was like, oh, let me just go bio and maybe I'll become a doctor. Yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'll be a doctor. So my first summer after my freshman year, I interned at a hospital. My dad pulled some strings, and I got an internship at a hospital working in the radiology department, and was the most miserable summer in terms of days of the summer of my life, because I worked days and then I was still gigging like 3 or 4 nights a week. So I was like hauling in the dough. But that experience, I'm grateful that my dad got me into that hospital to be an intern, because it spelled out very clearly what I was not cut out to do, which is work in the medical industry. I was like, nope, I can't do this. So I go back to college as a sophomore thinking, okay, I'll finish my pre-med requisites, which I did. And I was like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? I was like, wait, let me shift to something that's more accessible. So I got my thinking cap on. Okay, let me just go for an econ degree, because there's still time for me to do that. And at that point, I'd already taken 1 music class, and I'm like, oh, let me take some more music classes too. So I literally got an econ degree out of my first college. I went to Occidental College in Los Angeles, and I got an econ degree. Didn't quite get enough credits in the music classes, because I had to overload my econ classes to get the degree in 4 years. But I took like 4 or 5 music classes, so I almost like minored in music at that point. And my senior year, when I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, maybe I'll go work for a bank and still gig at night or something. Turns out one of the guys in the top 40 band, his name's Mike, he ended up attending Berklee College of Music, and he said, Dave, dude, you got to come check this out. And the summer between my junior and my senior year, I went out to Boston and I checked out Berklee, because he was doing a summer semester there, and I was like, oh, this is where I should have gone to school, but I didn't. And everything happens for a reason, you know. And I went to Berklee, and I like to say the rest is history, because that very first week of attending Berklee is I moved into this tiny apartment on Charles Gate East in it's called Back Bay, off of Boylston Avenue. And I'll tell the story. It's kind of funny. The first week I got into Berklee, tested into like higher levels of ear training and theory. I was really glad. I was really excited. I was like, I had a lot under my belt musically, so I felt like I really fit in. And I went and got my piano teacher. I was piano performance, but also music production, like synthesis based, because I was studying keyboards. I also took drum lessons, by the way. That's just a small side note. I love drums as well, so I was kind of took drum lessons in high school and played in the marching band, and like I was all over the map musically in a way. But piano was my real instrument, and I met a girl the first week of college, and we exchanged numbers, and I invited her over to my place, and I bought a bottle of wine, and I didn't have a wine opener, and she got to my place, and I'm like, oh, I don't have a wine opener. I knocked on the door of the apartment next to me, just looking for a wine opener. This is back, no cell phones, no nothing. This is 1989. And this guy answers the door, and he's got hair down to his, like he's like a hair farmer, like serious hair. And that was the day I met Neil Goldberg, my partner, who I founded Heavyocity with. The first week of music school, I met Neil, and he was a guitarist, and he was in the music production and engineering program, and we became fast friends and just kind of inseparable in terms of our just hunger and thirst for music and just making the most of it. You know, he was doing all these projects. Sorry, I'm talking.
There's one important question before we continue with that.
Yeah.
Did Neil have the wine bottle opener?
Oh, yeah. He did. He did.
Okay.
But I
Good job, Neil.
I sat there for like 10 minutes talking to him, and I was like, all of a sudden realized, oh my gosh, her name was Helle Lund. I remember her still to this day. She was from Denmark.
Swedish. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
Danish,
Nordic.
Yeah. And I realized I just was talking to him for like 10 minutes because we just started. I was like, oh, you go to Berklee? Yeah, you too. And like, what do you play? I'm a guitarist. And like, oh, I play keyboards. I grew up playing piano. And then we started talking about musical interests, and it turned out that Neil was like this total shredder, but he had this, all of his kind of his like preferences, the kind of music he liked was right in line with the kind of the artists and bands that I liked. I was like, oh my gosh, we're kind of like in sync musically, and like, man, and this guy's super cool, and he's got awesome hair. Not that mattered, but I was like, man, all right, this is cool. And so yeah, I did get the wine opener, and I was like mortified. And I went back. She's like, did you have to like go down the street to get it? And I was like, no, I just saw somebody who I knew. I made up a story, and so yeah, that was like, Neil and I were fast friends, and I have such fond memories of those days at Berklee, and just the growth musically that I made there, and what it presented to not just myself but to Neil too. We both he graduated before I left Berklee, and he ended up getting a gig with a speed metal band, Annihilator, and he ended up in Vancouver recording an album and touring with them. And I was still in music school. I was like, damn, I'm still at music school, and Neil's like becoming a rock star. So I was like, this really, man. But it was okay. I was super happy for him because he deserved it. He like really was a consummate about his craft, and to this day he's still like, the Neil Shreds videos is all you have to look at to see like what an accomplished player he is, and just how talented he is.
So your degree was in piano and music production?
Yeah, I actually to be transparent, I left Berklee and never formally received a degree because they wouldn't allow me to transfer GE credits from Occidental, and in order to transfer the number of credits, it would have to graduate with the degree I had qualified for, it would have cost in the neighborhood of about $30,000 to transfer the credits. And I was like, I'm not going to take these classes or pay for credits. And my parents had been gracious enough to support me in music school, knowing that he may very well not make it in this career and he'll fall back on something. So and to my parents' credit, they supported me going to music school, I think largely because they saw how motivated and how ambitious I was. They saw what I was doing with these bands, I never asked them for money in high school because I always had it because I was playing in cover bands. And we were responsible kids, even though we did have fun and we partied and did everything normal kids who were semi-well-adjusted in that sense, So I was grateful that my parents were progressive enough to say, our son wants to be an artist or go to music school. Like, we're going to let him chase his dream. And that, I'll never forget being able to do that. And that's important. And I reflect on that as a parent of a 10-year-old. I want, I've been cautious about being overly, you got to do 8 things and overachieve and this and that. It's like, I want him to just be a kid and develop his own desires and goals and aspirations, try and nudge him in certain places and whatnot. But yeah, I think that the technical term was like synthesis, performance, and production. But I was really into writing, composing, and music production with technology. Because at that point in time, we didn't have the luxury of technology we have now. Back then, it was like a Mac SE30 with a 80 meg hard drive or something like that.
So what year is this about? Like
91 when I left Berklee. So 91, and my senior project for Berklee was a 10.5-minute piece that I wrote, and I produced it and sequenced it on what was called Vision. It was a sequencer application, and Neil had a Porta 2 studio, and we recorded all of I did all of the keyboard parts and all of the all the composition parts, and we did it on whatever. I think it was a 4-track. We did it on. We bounced it all down and mixed it to 2 tracks, and then he recorded on 2 tracks. He did a stereo guitar pass because I wanted him to play guitar on it because it was a very progressive, proggy kind of instrumental 10.5 piece. I called it A Trip Through the Limits. I have to see if I can dig it up. It's on DAT someplace. And I was very into bands like Dream Theater back then. We were into heavier music. I was a big I liked heavier, like harder rock music growing up. But Dream Theater was a band that I really looked up to. Those guys, I think most of them went to Berklee. So, yeah, I don't even remember what your question was at this point.
Me neither. But I guess we could. So okay, Neil went to be a rock star, and you stayed in touch with him, and then Berklee ended for you.
Berklee ended. I drove back across the country with the guy who had encouraged me to come look at it, Mike. And I was in my parents' house, and I was going to set up camp, but I had developed I had gotten an agent in Los Angeles who was placing, as they call, hired guns, and she found me a gig to go and become the touring keyboardist for Gary Richrath, who was the lead guitarist from REO Speedwagon, and he had recently left that band and formed his own band called Richrath, and they had just recorded an album, and they were going on, they had already been on a few legs touring, and they were touring largely the Midwest because REO Speedwagon was a huge household name there. still, even in the 90s, even though their hits were mainly in the late 70s and 80s, like he was still he was a good draw in the Midwest and some other regions too, like Florida. And there's like, I ended up joining that band and played over 200 shows in about roughly 2.5 years or so. And that was a real, like, that was the real world education, living out of a suitcase, waking up in a different city almost every day. Was definitely an experience that I would never trade in for anything. But I also learned a lot about how grueling and treacherous life on the road can be. And it also led me to a place where I realized, like, I don't think this is sustainable, because I see people around me who are not doing well. And I was also in this position of like, oh, every night we're playing is like a big party, and we would do 4 or 5 shows a week. And the running joke was like, the nights off are the nights that we're actually recovering from the chaos of having a show, and then it's a big party afterwards, right? And all the things you hear, all the cliches are real, none of it's made up. It's not fabricated. It's like, the rock star life, and I wouldn't call myself a rock star at all. It's just like that life back then. I really realized how slippery that slope could be. And I got myself to a point where I was like, okay, it's time to just let off the gas and wind things back, pull things back a little bit, as far as like my patterns of routine and behavior as it pertained to the gigs. I started being a little more mindful of my future and what was really important, which is making sure I had a head on my shoulders. And I started to really be more careful about how I was treating the job I had, because I was a hired gun. And
what do you think? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you think helped you see that? Like, was it your experience? Was it the physical, hangovers, or what?
I can tell you exactly. Yeah.
Because a lot of people get stuck in that, and they get stuck in the lifestyle, and then they can't get out. And
addiction is everybody knows it's real. And alcoholism, drug addiction, food, gambling, take your pick. For me, it was, I saw, again, not to name anybody, I saw people around me who were struggling and had issues, and I could see it being detrimental to the potential and sometimes the performance. And the one thing I will say, I never went on stage obliterated or messed up. The most I would do, like before a performance, I might have a beer before a performance, but that was the one thing I always, again, this comes from the work ethic. Don't ever, get the job done before you decide to do something that's maybe counter, productive to your job, right? So I would be very, very diligent about making sure I could perform my duties. I got the gig, and they were starting the tour. Just to side note the question, I had to be responsible, because I had to learn literally a 40-song set that we could be playing from in less than a week. And I was going to be expected to sing background vocals. And literally, I spent 5 days trying to shed these tunes, working from live tapes, working from albums, working from other things. But I got on the tour bus to drive out to Springfield, Illinois, a 2-day drive where they're driving like 12 hours a day, whatever. And I'm in the back bunks with my D70 controller, still shedding these tunes. And our first show was the Illinois State Fair, and there was like 5,000 people there. And so I couldn't afford to screw this up. I had to, and my audition wasn't even live with the band. It was a tape of me jamming a few solos over a few songs they asked me to do solos on, and I sent it within like 2 days, and they told me I had the gig. So, so that initial like motivation manifested itself later on when I'd done, probably a good 175 shows, and I was still cranking along with them. And I was realizing, like, I woke up one day and I was like, I'd always been really good about just going about my days and just like I had my ritual. Like I never would wake up and like the party didn't start until after the gig, period. And then this one day I was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, of all places, and I woke up and that thought in my mind is like, I was like, oh man, I could really use a beer. And it was like 11 in the morning. And I have zero issues telling anybody this story because I think it saved my life in some ways. I sat on the edge of my bed and I realized this is not a healthy thought at all. And I got on my clothes and I went out to the beach and I walked up and down the beach for about an hour and a half doing some serious soul searching. And after that hour and a half, I decided that we were about to go back across the country, the southern portion of the country through like Louisiana and into Texas and then come through New Mexico and Arizona back to Los Angeles. The band house I was in Los Angeles. I was staying at the band house, and I realized we were going to be touring for 3 more weeks back across the country. And I said to myself, you know what? You're going to just take this next 3 weeks and you're not going to have a drink for 3 weeks and see how you do. See if you can do it. I just said that to myself. I'd never been in any kind of program for alcohol or anything like that. I just like, it was like the self-imposed challenge to do it. And I managed to do it. And I was very, it was a pride moment, like realizing, okay, that's fine. You're good. And that was pulling me back from the clutches of real addiction and disease that affects so many people. And in some ways, I was like, okay, I've hit a certain bottom here where I need to pull myself away from this. And fortunately, it in some ways it saved my life. I don't think I would be here talking to you today if I didn't do that. So it really straightened me out and allowed me to understand the perils and the danger of not taking inventory of what you're doing to yourself when you consume too much, and if I can spread a positive message about it, I'm going to, and I have never been vocal about it, but it's nice to be able to share that with an audience in a healthy capacity that I have today about it. All the things I have, the gifts that I have today are because I, came to terms with something at some point in time, and that's really important. So
no, it's definitely huge because as we know, creatives and substances and all kinds of addiction tend to go hand in hand. It's really interesting because like I would never drink before doing music because for whatever reason, if I had a beer, even just a beer, I would lose the spark. Like I would lose the emotional connection to the music, which was really strange to me. Like I remember I would sit down to play the drums, and I love playing the drums, and it's so energizing. But if I had a beer, it would take all of that away. It would take the emotion away. And I was like, why would anybody do this? And obviously this is specific to me. Probably many others experienced the same thing. But I think that kind of, I've certainly been through phases where I've drank more alcohol than I should have. And it was not constructive and resourceful as a part of my life. But I think that one was very beneficial because I loved music and I loved going on stage and, performing. And why would I, I didn't want to lose that magic for any cost. And I liked being intoxicated every once in a while. But like for music, it was for me, like I would lose that connection. I don't know is that something you experienced or have you heard anyone else say anything like that? Because I know a lot of people say that it enhances the experience for them?
Well, to be honest, Markus, I don't think I've heard exactly what you're talking about, but what you're saying reminds me of what is clear in my mind. It's like it works until it doesn't, right? I think there's something about, if you smoke a little weed or you have a drink, there's something about it. It opens the mind up, and it does. It enables different channels and circuits. I'm being very, dumbed down about it, but it allows you to, tap into different areas of your brain that may not be, present when you're very clear-minded and focused and in true clear sobriety. And I, over the years, I didn't just stop those 3 weeks. I went back to consuming and have had those periods of consuming more than I should probably, and periods where I didn't consume as much. And I've consumed while being at home and playing and practicing, or just like noodling. And I'll say this: never in my life, in terms of my post career from touring, have I ever been consuming alcohol or any drug of choice or anything while I've been composing or working in the capacity that I did after being on the road. So I think it's kind of erroneous to think that these mind-altering substances are going to make you a better composer or better this or better that. That's just your ego telling you that. I can guarantee you, you don't drive better when you're drunk, right? It's like, so you don't think necessarily better when you're drunk. You don't perform anything better when you're drunk. So I think it's all about the individual has to decide what's right for them. As a person who has been in the arena of very heavy consumption with the touring and just being around it, living in New York City for 25 or so years, like it's a drinking city, and everybody's out at the bars, and like it's hard to avoid. And I think even like during COVID, there was this huge boon of people just drinking, posting pictures of the beer they're having today, and I'm like, man, this seems a little out of control, but like it's not my place to say what anybody should be doing, like whatever works for somebody, it's up to them. But for me, the term balance and moderation spills into, hey, if I'm going to be good at what I do, I have to make sure I can do it with a clear conscience and understanding that I'm doing my best. And I know there's been moments where it's like, if you go into work with a huge hangover, you probably won't be doing your best. So, and, over the years, I've been guilty of that. I can't deny that. But at the same time, it's like, we live life one day at a time, and we try and, figure out the balance. And as far as being creative, I don't believe that mind-altering substances are the key to being an incredible creative force. That's not what I believe myself, but that's just me.
Yeah, well, agreed. So where did you go from there? Like, I would probably want to understand how you sort of got more into music composition.
Yeah.
And also, where did the Heavyocity stuff begin to? When did that, and where did that begin to brew?
Right. So, at a certain point in touring, I met somebody who I really fell for, and I ended up. I won't go too deep into it, but I ended up leaving the gig because I was really smitten over this person, and she happened to live in Illinois, and I moved to Illinois, and I spent a couple years living there, and whole life change for me. I went from being a touring musician on a different city every day to wow, I'm in Bloomington, Illinois, and I have to figure out a different way to make ends meet. So I actually started teaching piano lessons, and I was believe it or not, I was delivering pizza for a while. Like I was just like in this weird place, and I was
Anything for love.
well. Everything that's part of your story is important, right? And that was also just my tenacity. I cared about somebody, and I was going to be a person to make ends meet and do it any way I could. And at that point in time, Neil had left Annihilator, and he had gotten a job at a production facility in Waterford, Connecticut, of all places, called Sonolus Studios. And they were looking for a staff composer, and Neil said, "Hey, I know this guy. He's really talented." And Neil called me and said, "Listen, they're hiring somebody, and I recommended you." And I flew out there, and they interviewed me, and I got hired. And I moved to Connecticut and started working at the same place Neil was working, and we were reunited. And that's when the whole composition era of my life really took shape. Neil was the resident head engineer for Power Station New England, which was a composite of the original Power Station built in New York City by Tony Bongiovi. And this facility was doing a lot of kind of regional advertising. They were doing a lot of stuff for the Navy, it was like born out of a military research facility, and they were making videos. And it's a weird origin of Sonolus Studios. Sonolus, the name, it's a mouthful. It's sonar analysts. That's what Sonolus come from. So I hate pronouncing it. It's like, I wish they would just call it like cool music production studios or something. But
I like it because it sounds like you're saying sauna.
Yeah.
So I obviously like it as a Finn.
But it was like multifaceted. They did, animation and they worked a lot with like I said, regional clients. ESPN did a lot of stuff there. A lot of, Otis Elevators, Pratt and Whitney, and they had some more national clients like Duracell and a few others. And that's where I, landed and cut my teeth on getting into more technology and composing. And Neil was in Power Station, but I was in one of the composing rooms, and there was another gentleman also working in the composition end of things. And while I was composing, I also learned extensive sound design techniques and doing like Foley and all of that stuff. And I learned a lot about recording, and we were using audio vision at that point. Avid audio vision, where you could lock to picture. And this is in the days of you're still running everything through MIDI bays. And for people who are gearheads, my rig was like a Kurzweil K2500 was my controller. Neil had a emulator E4X, I think, when we were both composing together at a certain point. And I had like a Roland JV1080, a bunch of modules. I had the O1W, which is Korg. I had a Korg wave station rack. What else did I have? It was a lot of like multi-timbral. The Korg M1, that was one of my main, my early loves was the M1 because it was finally had a piano that sounded like a real piano. It wasn't a sucky piano. For the longest time, you wanted a real piano, and then like I think Ensoniq came out with the ESQ1 that sounded good, and then the Kurzweil, which was way expensive. As a kid, I couldn't get one, but then finally got one when I was at Sonolus. So we were composing for, like I said, industrials and regional stuff, and then we ended up getting some Discovery documentaries, which were more high profile, and a Saturday morning cartoon that came in, which was a lot of fun. But this is where I learned how grueling, scoring, 18 minutes of two-picture music in, 4 days, and then you finish one episode, or it's like five days with, doing the final mixes and revisions or whatever. You finish the one episode, and then the next morning, the following episode shows up via FedEx, and you have to start working on that episode. It was a grueling residency there, learning a lot about music production, and I credit Neil a lot with a lot of my production chops that I learned just in terms of engineering and overall, you just understanding how to get a sound and recording and all of that stuff. So my world of MIDI-based recording and the technology I learned at Berklee kind of really mirrored his in a more traditional recording, in a studio environment. So, and him being a guitarist, me being a pianist, keyboardist, like it was almost like a perfect marriage of two different foundations, and we really had a great, there's a great synergy between what we did musically, and I have such fondness of those early days of, really coming up and getting to cut our teeth on a lot of composition stuff over the course of about 3.5 years.
So
And
how much did you compose before getting this job? Because you were primarily a live performer,
yeah,
like an
yeah, yeah.
instrumentalist. So were
I
you composing along the years, and what was your sort
my
of
my
composition on your
yeah.
free time like?
I was very limited in what I could compose, but I was really, really tenacious about like I could do this kind of thing. And literally the first week that I got to Sonolus, they were doing a jingle for I can't remember, a travel agency. And I wrote a jingle, and it was called My Coast. And there was another guy, the guy named Frank, an amazing singer. And so I came up with I was the Elton John, and he was the Bernie Tarpon with the lyrics and the singing. And Neil was producing, playing guitar. So like it was fun. Like I had to answer your question. I'd composed maybe, I don't know, 10 pieces of music, between like real big pieces of music over the Berklee days. And then I had done so much improvisation in high school. I had throughout college. I studied with a man, his name's Alaudin Matthew. And I'll give you the name of a couple books that he's written, which are like, he was a true mentor to me about not just music and piano and being a player and a composer or a performer, but just the world of sound that we live in and appreciating the world for its musicality. And that's something that actually down the road was the reason why I got into sound as a musical aspect of production. Like the sound, the natural occurring sound in the world could be part of your production in a musical context. And his first book, I think it was called Musical Life or Musical World. Well, forgive me, I'll get it to you, but it's this series of short essays on the musical world we live in and the fact that we don't even realize it. And so composing was like something that was developed in me through my improvisational skills as a result of my mentor. And I just hadn't composed a lot, but my understanding of theory was really pretty solid, especially coming out of Berklee. I knew how to write a piece of music. I just had to have the opportunity to do that. And that's what happened. And Neil was in the same boat. Neil had written some really cool stuff before I even got there. He wrote for a series on ESPN, a high school sports show that was awesome. And I was really excited to go and be reunited with him, not just for having the opportunity to actually do what I love and actually start making a real living doing it again after, being in Illinois, but also just rekindling my friendship with him and just having somebody who I really cared about in my life again on a, pretty much daily level. So,
So once you started composing, did you have any feelings or thoughts about it? Did you go like, oh, holy crap, like this is really cool? Or were you sort of being more, I don't know, professional, mechanical about it? And also, how did you find doing sort of music for media, or doing music for that sort of very specific, I guess, craft
Yeah.
or purpose?
I'm just trying to collect my thoughts on answering succinctly. The great thing about that experience and being so green and not writing a lot of music and being thrown into the fire a little bit with it is that I got to test and challenge myself to see what I was really made of. Can I do this? And do this on a level where it's not just, oh, I can do whatever I want. There's a brief on every level in terms of when you have a client, you have to adhere to certain requests from the client. And it's not just writing a piece of music, it's actually figuring out a way to speak the language that they know musically, because everybody's different. And it's hard to get an idea across when you don't know how to explain it musically, because they don't know modality, they don't know structure, they don't understand. Most people don't. And I'm not saying that to be disparaging or disrespectful. It's just their world is not writing the music. Their world is to say, I want a song that sounds like this, and you're supposed to come up with it, right? So I always thought it was fun to be challenged to come up with a piece of music that fit the bill, right? And the other side of that is when it doesn't resonate and people don't like it. And if I fast forward the story to where Neil and I we moved in, it's probably appropriate to move into New York City. We left Sonolus together, and we joined a jingle house in New York City and started working predominantly in commercial advertising. And that's where writing for real media, like we were working on blue chip accounts, GE, Gillette, Pepsi, NFL, KFC. There was a laundry list of big blue chip clients that this music house was already kind of working on. And that's when I realized, the level of scrutiny that you go up against when it has to be just perfect, or somebody's having a bad day, and no matter what whatever you send them, there's going to be something wrong with it. We still have war wounds from some of the gigs that we did. We actually had a Super Bowl ad in one of the years, and then there was another Super Bowl ad that we had the opportunity to write for, and I'm not kidding. I believe we did 12 different demos. We kept on redoing and revising, and we continuously kept on trying to get it right. They just wasn't right. 12 iterations, and by the end of it, we were like, we wanted to just we can't. And they ended up licensing a song for the Super Bowl ad, and we just looked at each other and we didn't get anything for our efforts, really. I mean, at that point in time, you would get demo fees for submitting tracks, and the demo fees weren't going to pay the bills at all. And that was right around the time when things were getting a bit stranger in the world of commercial advertising, the world at large. This is pre-2008 at this point, when that big collapse happened, the big recession occurred then. But there's pros and cons to writing for clientele, and the pros are that you have the opportunity to make a mark and get exposure and do something you're really proud of and share it with the world and have pride in that, hopefully healthy pride. And the other side of it is it's very stressful, coming up with the right track or the right cue, what sounds good that you think works, that also works for the person or the people you have to seek approval from. And I think that's the real tough part is now it's like everything's the playing field today. I wouldn't want to. It just seems everything's different than it was 20 years ago in terms of writing music, and what everybody's up against in terms of the playing field that we're on now versus then. It was a little more simple back then, but still, it was it wasn't the easiest road because you always had competition. There was always 4 or 5 music houses writing for the same spot, and there'd be 18 tracks submitted for one spot, and so that part of it's difficult. The rejection that you would get, just that part's no fun. You write a piece of music, you want to be proud of it, and nobody else likes it. It's like, oh, okay, well, it's okay.
Yeah, it kind of takes a special gear because a lot of artists, when they try something like that, doing music or any kind of creative work for somebody else, they realize, wow, I don't really want to do what you want. Like, I want to do what I want. And it kind of takes a certain type of a person to want to do that, but also realize certain realities of doing that as a job. You have to. It's about serving a customer, and yes, it's creative work, but you're in a different. It's a different business than it is to write something that you want and try and make it as good as possible.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And you go into it knowing the parameters of the gig, but they don't always. You don't realize it can sting a bit. Again, the rejection that you get when your piece isn't accepted, or you write something that you really think is great, and nails it, and the client's just, nope, I don't hear it. And it's like it's like, and you hear that, and it's like there's no rejoinder to that. You can't, that there's no convincing them. They've moved on, And there's this thing, I'll say one more thing before we kind of push beyond that whole era of existence. There's something known as demo love, and it exists today, where somebody hears a track they see a spot or a cue, and there's a track on it already. It's a temp track, and they're like, oh, it's perfect. Nothing is gonna ever match up to that perfection that they're hearing, because it's like ingrained in their mind that that's what it has to be. And there's this psychological, just edge that sound is going to have, and anything that you submit that's somewhat close, but you can't get too close. You don't want to get sued because you're ripping something off. But that was also one of the most frustrating things. We want it to sound just like this, and go license the track. The sound-alikes that I hear on spots these days. It's like, I guess it's because it's expensive to license the original artist or whatever. So I do get it, but it's like, is it worth it? I don't know.
A lawsuit can also be expensive. So
yeah, for sure.
But that's the issue. Like, I've also experienced that to some degree, like in the video game music world. You obviously have a developer who already have some, temporary tracks in there that they've been throwing into the game and kind of getting a reference. But they've been listening to that music for maybe, who knows, a year, 2, 3 years. It depends on how long they've been developing it. But the power of repetition, the power of familiarity, the power of what they expect, it's really hard to break through that. And you're asking them to see the creative work from a completely, well, not necessarily completely, but a very different perspective, because music changes the context of what it is attached to. So it's really tough, because you want to kind of grab the essence of what they like about the demo tracks and what it is that they love about, the essence that they love. Take it, but then also there is a bit of a benefit. If you manage to take that essence and do like a nice fresh twist on that, that can also play to your advantage, because they're like, ooh, hey, this is like that, but it's different. So now you're leveraging the newness to your advantage, but it's really difficult to bring those together a lot of the time.
Completely. And you made a really good point, Markus, about sometimes it's important to bring something out that you know is going to help a track that they may not be aware of. It's always good to have options and alternatives and things that you can pull out of a hat sometimes. And going back to the commercial advertising, sometimes I would have just extra things in a session because I knew like he may not go for this, so I'll have this sound or that sound. And we did a lot of sound design, custom sound design work on a lot of spots when we were in the city. That's some of the sound design aspect of our history, like part of the identity of Heavyocity. We're a music meets sound design. You know, we blur the line between music and sound design. That was what was such a huge part of what Heavyocity was at its conception. But both with sound design and music, when we were doing a lot of spot work, you know, having a different instrument to play the same thing or a different line or this, that, you know, it's always, you know, being able to pivot and quickly shift and understanding people by how they're talking, their body language. Like sometimes you just know you're not going to win a conversation in terms of, hey, I really think this is better. And the relationship is always going to dictate what you're able to push and get away with in terms of, and when I say get away with, or at least do to promote your agenda for putting your best foot forward musically, because it's very subjective. What we think is best may be, oh my God, that's absolute hot trash for somebody else, right? And so that's where it's tough to deal with the emotions of, again, I keep saying the same word, rejection. You know, when we're very sensitive creatures, us creative types, you know, we tend to not like when we get rejected on any level. Like I reject myself. Like I literally yesterday was making snapshots for our latest project that we're working on. And, you know, sometimes I'll go down a rabbit hole and I'll work for like 15 minutes on something. And I'm just like, why did I just waste that much time on this? This sucks. This is terrible. And I'll just beat myself up for a minute and then I'll just take a deep breath and be like, okay, wait, it's okay. It's all right. You know, it's not going to kill you that this is not great or that somebody said this isn't good or whatever, you know, like gotta wear.
And it's also progress to know what not to do. That's one of the things, because it's so hard to come to the studio and you can work on something for hours and then you realize, well, hopefully you can bring that down as you become more experienced because you learn to recognize the things that don't work.
Sure.
But let's say it's not, for me, not unfamiliar to come to the studio, work on something for a couple or 3 hours and then be like, nope, this doesn't work. And it's really rough to go to work and know that you sort of didn't get paid for that time or that you didn't make progress. But you have to also remember that you knowing what it is that you don't want to do is progress. But it's just rough that it takes sometimes quite a lot of time to find out.
Yeah. I think there's something about saying, you know, time takes time. You know, you can't expect miracles overnight. You know, some like even if it's like learning a new piece of music or whatever. You know, Neil and I joke around sometimes about, you know, he likes learning solos of, you know, really, really hard solos, and he'll play it for me and I'm like, oh my God, it's so good. And he's like, I'm effing up this part and that part. And I'm like, dude, like, you're so hard on yourself, man. Like, and it's just like, and I think about Ari, you know, the third partner in the company, and Ari just like the immense talent, and sometimes he's just, you know, bouncing ideas off, and I can sense some sort of insecurity. And I'm like, I have to catch myself because I get so frustrated, you know, like because he's so freaking talented, he's so good, and he's I'm gonna use age as his weapon. You know, he's only he's a lot younger than me, so I'll use that. But like, it's amazing how like sometimes our insecurities get the best of us, and it's really nice to, like, I have my own insecurities, but to be surrounded by the people that I am where I am, like, I love the fact that I'm inspired by the people that I work with, and I know that they're inspired by what I do, and there's a great there's something that just inspiration feeds inspiration kind of thing, and even if it's not perfect, the pursuit of perfection is just that. Perfection is so overrated, and we have a phrase here, and I'm getting a little in the weeds on it, but it's important to say this about perfection, and I'm not sure who came up with it. I think it was Neil. I'm not sure if this is something that he found or whatever, but he said one day when we were working, this is years ago, he said, good enough is the best friend of perfect, right? Sometimes good enough is okay. And, when you're working on a creative idea, sometimes we get lost in the minutia of trying to make it perfect. And, sometimes you just got to move on. You can't stay in one place. You gotta, if something's not working quite right, you pull yourself out, reset, start again.
Yeah, I mean, perfect is often the enemy of progress. And the thing is, like, also what I try and remember is that we are such like finicky creatures. One day you come to the studio, you work on something, and you're like, this is crap. And then you leave and you're mad at yourself and you're like, I'm the worst composer of all time. Then you come back the next day, listen to that same thing, same exact piece, and you're like, hey, this is actually pretty good. And then you tweak a couple of things and you're like, I'm a genius. Not quite, but so it's like, don't let your mood and your emotions, they come and go. So you're going to have a different perspective every day. So you have to give yourself some space.
Yeah, I just want to interject on what you just said, Markus, because it's so funny. It's reminding me of, Neil comes up with these catchphrases all the time. And there's another one, when we demo for our products, for our instruments, we'll write, musical pieces, compositions that, reflect what the instruments are capable of. And a lot of times, we'll walk into each other's rooms now and say, I hate my track. I think it's done. Like, you get to a point writing your track, you're like, oh, this is great. And then you get to a point where it's like, I don't like this anymore. I really don't like this. And then that's when the track is done, right? Like, you get to that point where you've over like saturated your brain with trying to understand and accept what you've written, and you've gone too far into over analyzing what it is. And that's the one thing for me now. I like the fact that music it seems to be simplifying in some ways. It's still very, like, it's as deep as you want to go and as complicated and as varied. But I'm learning about the less is more of sound in music, and the idea that a few things can really make something special. And that in itself kind of plays into my whole mindset about life itself. When you keep it simple, it tends to work better. But if it's complex, but if there's a good organizational structure to the complexity, you tend to do pretty well with it, right? So it's all balance.
Yeah. That's something I struggle with, because especially once I got into the world of mixing a bit and you understand production and mixing, then you start to understand the arrangement and the actual selection of instruments even a lot better. Because you can be a good arranger, but you could be better if you understood like basic mixing principles. Because once you start throwing stuff into the mix, you go like, it's beginning to sound obviously more crowded, but the mixing gets more difficult the more stuff you have in there. And then you're like, okay, if I remove stuff, I can make it sound better. And then you realize, okay, I didn't actually need those things. So it's it has been a bit like a great teacher, mixing itself, to assess your productional abilities as well as your like arrangement abilities. It's been a big
Yeah.
thing for me.
Yeah, I will say this unequivocally. I find myself muting tracks all the time because it's like, what is this doing? It's it's not doing anything except putting more into the track that should not be there because I can't even notice it amongst the 6 other instruments playing the same thing or whatever. Yeah, simplifying mixes is a really important consideration. If you can get 3 things to do something that you're doing with 12 things, you should probably have the 3 things do it, right? And some of the ways that we develop our instruments is designed to streamline the process of helping composers and people just who have an affinity for music to find a sound quickly with the tools that we offer. And that's the beauty of progression and technology and influencing a positive, I don't want to say a change, but a progression in how people utilize tools, musical and of technology related to music and virtual instruments as we refer to them. But yeah, it's fascinating when it comes to mixing, how it depends on what you're mixing in terms of the considerations, right? Because if you're a producer and you're making a rock album, you're going to mix a certain way because you have a certain arrangement, right? If it's an orchestral score, it's going to be different. If it's a eclectic acoustic score for a psychological thriller, it's going to be yet again different. And what's cool is like there's different tools to embrace to accommodate whatever the mixing needs are, and where I think my mindset, my mind comes into play in terms of looking at what's happening is that the evolution of music and how we compose music and consume it, obviously, it's changing and evolving. So mixing in its own way is doing the same thing. If you listen to a song from the 80s and a song from the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s and now 2025, you can hear a natural progression of how things are mixed and how they're different. Just pick a genre. And I don't consider myself an expert. I'm not like a mix engineer per se. I'm like a person who learned through experience, and I know like I can get a decent mix. And that's just by the traditional things that you would do, where you're isolating, instruments and channels, and you're EQing them properly and using the right amount of compression on this or that, or attenuating things. There's nothing, the rocket science of it is to blend all of your stems to feel like a cohesive piece, right? It's the mixes that feel like a real complete piece of music that is the important consideration. Because there's a lot of mixes that sound like, oh my gosh, like this does not sound like it was played by in one sitting. It was played in 8 sittings. You want a mix to sound like it's real. Right? Even if you know that it's, everything's coming out of the box and it's virtual, you want there to be an authenticity to the glue that provides the believability of a mix, if that makes sense. And then it depends on what you are mixing itself. Mix applications, whether it's music or sound design, or if you're doing broadcast stuff, where you're mixing voice with sound design and music, movie mixing, it's a whole different beast altogether. So it's a fascinating field, and I don't claim any kind of expert, wisdom in it. The first thing I would tell anybody is to trust your ears, as long as you have good hearing, and get a good pair of speakers and a good acoustical environment to hear it in. There's all the things that you can do with a mix to test it on a system that you trust, that kind of stuff. But yeah.
So, getting into the Heavyocity stuff, like how did you first, in the first place, like form, or how did it begin? Did it start with an idea? Did it start with a conversation? And how did you end up actually putting that to turning it
Yeah,
into something
I'll
real?
try and keep this as brief as possible. I'm very long-winded, as everybody can tell at this point. So Neil and I had been working and recruited Ari. Ari graduated Carnegie Mellon. He was our very first intern at our sister company, Heavy Melody, which was the composition firm. Heavyocity was not even an entity at that point. At the point Ari joined us, we were working in still commercial advertising and doing a lot of gaming work, video game work at that point. We kind of got away from commercial advertising, got a few opportunities to do some pretty high-profile games on
Can you
certain levels.
mention some of those?
Yeah, like the most notable, we did some Need for Speed games. We did like Shift 2 we did remixes for Shift 2. I think we did Hot Pursuit on the Wii. I think we did a Godzilla title. We did a couple of Atari titles. We did like our first real big game. We did Neverwinter Nights 2, which was I think Obsidian, maybe. That's a long time ago. This is back in the early to mid 2000s, like 2003, 2004, 2005.
So Heavy Melody was something you probably formed with Neil.
Yeah, Heavy Melody.
After you had your experience in the jingle
Correct.
and
Yes.
media music world.
Yeah, I don't want to skip over that. I don't want to gloss over that. You know, Heavy Melody was the first company that Neil and I started together, and we formed our own studio in New York City, and started working predominantly more in the gaming space than commercial advertising, because commercial advertising was kind of drying up, and we made a few solid, really good connections in the gaming industry and had some good opportunities. And we even went into doing dialogue production at one point. We were just kind of like feeling like, well, whatever we do, and let's do some dialogue production. We did some dialogue production too. I worked on a lot of 2K games in the mid 2000s and worked on a couple BioShock titles and
Oh, nice.
some Call of Duty stuff and
So
go ahead, sorry.
yeah, just to understand, because I love video games, so I sort of want to understand why was it sort of more like realizing the shift in the industry and pivoting to video games? Was it more like opportunistic in that sense, or was it, did you actually have, or some of you, did you have like a love for video games? And
both. Myself, speaking for myself, I was a arcade rat growing up. I was a child of the 70s and 80s, and I have today I have a basement that is filled with pinball machines and arcade cabinets. Like, I am a diehard arcade and pinball junkie. I love console gaming. I kind of fell out of console gaming a number of years ago. The last real big console game I played was probably Red Dead Redemption 2 and Grand Theft Auto 5. So I am waiting for Grand Theft Auto 6 for sure. I can't wait for that. I'm not sure when it's coming out, but
there's an ongoing meme about all the things that are going to happen before GTA
but that
6
I've seen that there's, I think, 2 trailers out there now, and I know an individual who works for Rockstar Games, and I don't know anything about the game or anything because they're real tight NDA there, but I'm just excited for that game. I think it's like those games are just how to lose a week of your life when it comes out. It's just so it was both. I was totally I loved console gaming at the time. We actually had 4 or 5 Xboxes, and we would do Halo death matches at the studio back in the day. So yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any? What are your favorite video games of all time? If you had to list a few.
Oh my gosh. We're gonna have to separate or compartmentalize it, like in the old school days, or like the retro games of like Donkey Kong, Pac-Man days, or
Yeah, I mean,
newer.
I can imagine that you've seen all the generations so far.
I
So
I
I mean, you
played
could.
Pong. I had a Pong in my house, or the one that you put on your TV.
Yeah.
So the early school games, my favorite first like games, Asteroids and Space Invaders were like groundbreaking, I thought at the time. Donkey Kong was another favorite. I loved Defender. I mastered Defender, and then a little later Robotron 2084. I was never like a Mario guy because at that point I got into college and like Super Mario Brothers, and then the Nintendo uh, N16, whatever it is, and then Nintendo 64. I kind of got out of gaming for a while because I was in college, and then I went on like I became sort of an adult, so gaming was like, I don't have time for that. But then a little later on, I got back into it. I think around the time of the PlayStation, the original PlayStation and PlayStation 2. So I got really into mostly first-person shooters, and I was a huge. Actually, in the '90s, I was into Quake. I loved Quake from id, Quake 2, Quake 3 Arena. Um, what else? Anything that was a first-person shooter was like I loved first-person shooters. I got into the Call of Duties later on. Um, More recently, I like the open world explorers, like the Grand Theft Autos were just huge. I loved those. BioShock series, I absolutely fell in love with that. I'm excited for what's his name? Ken Levine, I think he has a new studio called Ghost Story Games. He's got Judah in development, which is it's like BioShock in space, basically. If you haven't seen it yet. Yeah, so he has a new BioShock-esque game coming out, I think, in the next probably year or so. So yeah, I'm like a diehard gamer, but not so much today that I was maybe 5 years ago. But I don't have as much time to do that with chasing around 10-year-old and trying to keep the family structure together and work and just taking care of everything is there's a lot to it,
Yeah, I mean, video games are amazing, but it is a time sink. Like you
Hmm.
can sit down and like 3 hours or
Yeah,
5 hours are gone just like that. So
yeah, yeah,
it's pretty difficult if you have a lot of responsibilities
yeah,
to find the time.
yeah. I just play the old school stuff. Like I'll go down and play a couple games of pinball. I've got a Robotron, I've got a Tempest, I've got a original Tron. I got an Asteroids. So I'll play the old school stuff, and it's like 20 minutes, done, perfect. That's all I need. I'm not disappearing for 6 hours in a dark room with a gaming chair and sense around 4D vision goggles or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were deep in the heavy melody stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Yeah.
Ari came around.
Yeah.
So how
And
did you?
yeah, so here we go to Heavyocity was almost born by accident. I had gotten a portable field recorder, and I was making a lot of recordings, and I'd gone around the city recording various things and taken it on trips and recorded various things. And a lot of the commercial advertising we were doing and the sound design we were doing, we were kind of taking all these sounds that I had recorded, Neil had recorded. This is before Ari had really gotten into the fold, but like he became part of this. And we started amassing this private stock archive of different types of sounds that we were just curating based upon our recordings. And Neil started working with his guitar to record a whole bunch of guitar stuff. And it just like all of a sudden became this like huge stockpile of really interesting elements and elements that were not out there in the world. There was just a very few number of companies producing virtual instruments that were very, what I would say, in today's term, hybrid. They were not organic sources necessarily. A lot of them were born from organic sources, but we were doing a lot of post-processing and mangling, and as I like to say, throwing these raw sources into our labs and screwing them up with all the plugins that we had at the time, and just doing all this stuff to them, and what we had amassed at the end of this was a foundation that turned into what was Evolve, our first virtual instrument. When we realized we had something that was like different than what we were utilizing for our own productions, we thought, wow, we could probably turn this into something and sell it. And the timing couldn't have been more perfect, because right when we decided, hey, let's start a new venture, and we decided to call it Heavyocity, not Heavy Melody. Let's call it something else, because it's going to be software. We're going to create a software tool for people to utilize these sounds in their productions, and it'll be separate from the composition side. And so we did more curation. More specifically, we kind of organized the content into these buckets of the rhythmic stuff and the percussive kits, and then the more melodic side, and then the I think we called it stings and transitions. I didn't do my homework. I haven't cracked Evolve in a little while, but it was like covering this gambit of really it was a self-contained host of tools to write a complete track, because you had the rhythmic side and percussive side of like rhythmic beds. You had the melodic side with I sampled the 9D in California that was still in the living room I grew up playing, and that's what became the piano in Evolve, like just complete guerrilla style with the Sony portable recorder. It was so we were shooting from the hip, like seat of the pants development. But what we knew is we had some really, really unique, special content that we were developing, and then we managed to figure out how to get an engine to put it in when we partnered with Native Instruments and licensed the Contact engine, because that seemed like the easiest way to quickly be able to house it and put a simple skin on it and make it so it was serialized, and learned a lot about that, and then released it, and it was like this grassroots, let's launch it. But before we launched it, we went to the NAMM show in Los Angeles, which is the National Association of Music Merchants. I'm sure you've heard of that. It's a big trade show in Anaheim every year, or every year. And we went and we got a booth, and we got a big banner and like Evolve, and we were in the basement, as it's known, back in that time. This is like 2007. Because it launched in 2008, and the basement in those days was like, that's where you're relegated when you're new. Like, you go to the basement, oh, you're in the basement? Oh, wow. And now the basement's super cool, because I think that's where all the modular guys are. So if we were in the basement today, we'd be like the cool kids. But we were like the new kids on the block in the trade show. So over the course of, I think it's about 3 days or so, we started getting more traffic, because people on the main floor were talking about us, and we ended up having people from like Spectrasonics and all the other big players in the industry. People from these companies started coming and visiting our little humble booth, and it was a really awesome validation. Like, okay, we see that we have something here, and then we launched it, and it took a while for it to really take off, but it eventually did really well for us, and we realized we had something great, and then we moved on from there to another, our next project in that realm. And at that time, things got really dicey with the music world and the collapse of 2008. It was a really bad economic time and uncertainty in the world, and everybody was just like, oh my gosh, it was unpleasant to be going through that, because we knew a lot of people in the industry with music houses in the city that were going under, and the work had just evaporated and dried up, and game companies closing down. It was a rough time. And so that pivot, even though we didn't want to completely shift off of writing music, it was just it supplemented the music that we were writing, in the leaner times, so to speak, and it just became a bigger part of what we were doing. So it's kind
Where does the name Heavyocity come from?
of it was so a guy
And
that
who
used
came up with it?
so a guy that used to work for us. He brought up the term because we were always into heavy stuff, and Travelocity at that point was a really serious, like, Travelocity had become this brand, like everybody knew Travelocity.
I
And
don't think I know what that is.
Travelocity is a website to book it's an online travel agency site, where you book flights and hotels. And so the term Heavyocity were the heavy, like, hitters of sample-based virtual instruments, and like we had this heavy-hitting mindset, and we're aggressive and edgy, and so Heavyocity was what felt really good. And then I came to find out later on that there's a movie. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name. He's a comedian, but he coined the term Heavyocity in a movie. I think Annie Hall was the movie. He's an actor who has glasses. I can't remember his name. Anyway, I think the term Heavyocity was in a movie at some point. Somebody pointed out, and we didn't even know. But yeah, Heavyocity just felt like it works for us, because it kind of underscores there's a weight to it. It's a little heavy-handed, literally. But we've always, even though I believe it's somewhat misunderstood that Heavyocity isn't just about heavy hitting, tough as nails, in your face, aggressive, like that, we do have a very dynamic existence. We have a very wide spectrum of timbres that we like to push out there. It's not all an 11 as we like to go sometimes. It's we do have a softer side too.
Yeah, no, for sure. Is it like what does a typical development process look like? Do you have like a pool of, I mean, obviously without going into any company secrets or anything, that you feel free to not talk about stuff that you're not.
So first of all, we all get on into this big, like, 12-foot ring, and we get on boxing gloves.
Right.
And we ring a bell.
And everybody has an idea, and the guy who wins gets to decide.
Guess whose idea gets no.
That's where the martial arts comes in.
No, it's a really it's a good and deep topic that I can be pretty succinct about. We used to do it very haphazardly, and we never knew, like, how things were going to go. And now we're much more structured and organized, and we use, without getting too much into detail, we use a lot of platforms to help us organize and structure our development cycles. Just like any kind of professional organization would. If you're building a car, or you're developing a piece of software, if you're developing a video game, you have all of these mile markers in a development cycles, and these requirements that need to be met in order for a development cycle to be successful, right? So obviously there's a pre-production phase where you decide what is the idea, and then you vet the idea by way of determining, is this a viable idea, and that can be done in any way, shape, or form, whether it's through research or discussion, or a combination of the two things. It's done by you can actually even prototype ideas. In terms of, hey, I think this might be cool. Let me try and do something to this effect and see if this really would work. Uncharted 88, the percussive piano, the damage pack that we put out, that was born out of, I'd always wanted to do something that was just like the piano is such a percussive instrument, but never has been represented as a true percussion and not a musical, musical instrument, a melodic instrument. And so there was a good chunk of time that was spent, like I was just joking about this with one of the people in the company, and his name's Alejandro, and joking about the fact that we kind of built the instrument before we really built the instrument. We prototyped a bunch of different types of articulations from the piano to determine, hey, is this going to work or not? And after a few weeks of doing that, we determined that it did. This is great. It's going to be okay. And then the real heavy lifting begins, which is you progress into, kind of setting a roadmap for development. And there's various aspects of the development cycle, which I won't go too deep on, but you have to curate the source material, right? You have to record the raw source material. You have to edit the raw source material. The editing can take place before or after you master the source material. That depends. You have to clean up the source material. You have to get the source material into an engine. You have to organize and structure how the source material is going to be presented. You have to come up with the engine itself that's going to be the direct end user experience, and what is that going to entail? And then pushing forward, once you have the source material in the engine, then you have to curate the actual instrument itself in terms of what the preset structure, the layout of the instrument, the features of the instrument in terms of the presets, and how the user experience is defined in terms of today snapshots. It used to be NKIs, the NKI presets. We used to just use those, and things have evolved over time, not to use the pun, in terms of how we lay out our instruments. You'll load an NKI and then you have the folders of snapshots, which are far more efficient to find what you're looking for, and people with NKS will just type something into their NKS browser just to find a specific sound if they're looking for that. But I'm more of an old school guy, or new old school guy, with I like to browse in my instruments to find the sound I'm looking for, not necessarily just type a name into a random browser per se. So, and then once the instrument feels like it's in a good place, and mind you, we are doing QA along the way, bug testing, fixing things, cleaning up mistakes or issues, looping audio that needs to be looped for the engine, like if something's a infinite sustain. And one note about editing, we take a lot of pride in making sure that we try and get everything into the engine really tight and edited properly, because poor editing leads to a bad user experience. There's a lot of instruments out there, not so much more recently, but over the years, you'd buy a virtual instrument and you start playing with it, and you would record something and it wouldn't be airtight, and it just is so frustrating. And one of the things I take pride in doing some of the editing myself, because I know how important it is for it to play airtight and perfect, and that to me has been a funny, ironic thing that I still like. It's such a remedial job, but it's an important job that ensures the quality of the product. So editing's important, and then the quality of the presets. We like to say that we don't throw presets in just because we need to make a number of presets. We like to, you want to be arrowing down your presets and pretty much stopping on every one because you find something valuable in them. And that's the biggest, the most important final piece to the puzzle of the instrument, and making it really a complete package. Like, it sounds good, it looks good. Can I find what I'm need in this to make it worthwhile for my palette, that if I'm a composer, and that's we strive to put something really inspiring and unique and interesting into our instruments, and the process of developing these instruments, we oftentimes will come up with all these ways of developing the material, and then we'll shift and we'll pivot. And the project we're working on right now, in mid production of the instrument, we changed a few things. We actually decided to go a different road on a couple of things, and it set us back a bit, but it wasn't like the end of the world. It's just like some things feel like they're going to work, and then it's like, oh wait, let's shift this content bucket to something else, and these sources will become this, and this feels better. And so we like to have a lot of structure with some wiggle room as it is, and then after the instrument's done and gone from what's known as alpha, which is the kind of pre-final stage, to beta, which is the pre-release stage, and then you start looking at getting into the release materials that you would put out for the instrument to market it. Those include things like demos, writing demo tracks that feature the instrument's capabilities and the sound, and the preset playthroughs. I do pretty much all the preset playthroughs, and Luis helps me with a lot of those too. Luis does some stuff, and I over the years have done a majority of them. And then there's a demo walkthrough. Neil's done a ton of those, and Ari's done a few. I think Ari just did the one for ostinato textures. So those guys, it's amazing that you got me on camera, because I am the camera shy guy here. I don't like going on camera, but I want to thank you for getting me on to the podcast, because this is good for me to be doing this, because I want to be more present in being able to promote what we're doing, and kind of peeling back or pulling back the curtain on what we're doing, because I think there is a lot of interesting stuff going on here, and what we are curating is done with a level of passion and care that we have a healthy pride in, and when people take an interest, it's gratifying to know that people really can appreciate it, and that is one of the gifts of being able to do this. Sometimes I think that it's not really sexy to develop virtual instruments, but then I realize, that some of the correspondences we receive from people who are just like writing out of just writing us because they wanted to tell us how much of a difference our product made in their life, or whatever, or they're going through a tough time and they love to escape with our piano, or this is like the real human stories that come out of the curation of these instruments is a real, it's very, very powerful to hear that. And it's just a different way to have our creativity rewarded, in what we're doing here, because we're all composers here, and this stems from our love of composing, and it's like almost like an extension of that, but we're giving people that love, our love of composing in these tools. So
yeah, that's one of the patterns that I've noticed with a lot of companies in this field. It's almost always, like, if we think about, I don't know, Strazov sampling, they, who are composers, they got into Jasper Blanc for performance samples, same thing. Yeah. To my understanding, it's like doing music, composing, and then they kind of end up in doing this sort of on the side as a result.
Sure.
Or now they do it maybe as the most prominent thing.
And maybe. If I can just add one more thing about the foundation, that as I like to say, the cement that was poured to create a foundation for what Heavyocity became. What I find every day to be very rewarding for myself about what Heavyocity is that we always took a traditional approach and turned it on its side. And that's another thing Neil said. We took tradition and tipped it over, right? And to be able to influence a sound in composing, in modern composing and cinematic, we're more cinematically focused, and we drive more towards a cinematic sound. But in recent years, the very music that I love so much, these heavy bands, whether it's I Prevail or Starset or Sleep Token or like all these, or Slipknot, these heavy bands are now using the products like ours to like create this huge, incredible, almost like otherworldly sound underneath this really aggressive, modern metal sound. And it's really cool to see, cinema and heavy rock kind of collide in a way. And also like just sound design, very visual, very like thought-provoking, emotionally stirring, um, timbres showing up in these bands that I, have loved for so long. I mean, one of my favorite bands was Seven Dust, still is to this day, and those guys. I attribute a lot of who I am to like their music, because they got me through a lot of like tougher times in my life, and they're I think on their 14th studio album, and Clint uses a lot of Heavyocity stuff, and we met John, the other guitarist, at our very first NAMM show when we were down in the basement, and just like it's really cool to have what we do like not just be appreciated out there, but it leads us to these like connections that we've made with people that we really admire and look up to, as artists and musicians, producers and whatnot. So it's gratifying to be able to share that.
Yeah. Could you actually touch on what the landscape was like back in, what did you say, 2008? Because that's around the time when I started to dabble with DAWs and sample libraries. Maybe like,
Yeah.
I first I started with the default stuff that came with Pro Tools back in the day, and then when I started studying at university, this was 2011. That's when I bought my proper first set of sample libraries, and actually Evolve was part of that, and a bunch of other native instrument stuff. But I don't actually know like what the landscape was like. Did you have any sort of viable competitors even back then? And because I wasn't smart enough to or educated enough to go online and find anything else. I mean, I'm super happy I found your stuff because it worked well for me. But what was the landscape like overall back then?
Yeah, so the heavy hitters back when we launched in 2008, the biggest of the bigs I would say were Spectrasonics at that point, Eric Pearson's company. I think Omnisphere had just come out, and I was such a fan of Eric and his contribution. I mean, he's just like a prodigy. He was working for Roland when he was like 17 years old, I think, and he was responsible for a lot of the hardware gear that I was using to compose back in the Sonolith days, the JVs and whatnot. I think he recorded a lot of the string stuff, and they had all of the PCM sample-based playback and all of that. But his company, Stylus, RMX, and then, Trillion and Atmosphere, which became Omnisphere, he broke the mold of the CD-ROM at the time, which was like you were loading CD-ROM samples into 128 meg capacity to have a few strings and this and that, like better quality. And he was one of the first people to, I think, there was that. And then you had Native Instruments came out with Compact and Intact, I think. Intact was their rhythmic engine, and Compact was their sampler before it became Contact. And East West was also a up and coming company, and they released like Storm Drum, and that was on I think Intact or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But then there were some other like more traditional emulation companies. Trying to think. Oh my gosh, I'm going to blank on the name. Vienna Symphony. They released like the really like traditional orchestral instruments, and they were very realistic. And then Project Sam was just coming up around then. Project Sam had released a free French horn at a certain point, and then they released Symphobia right around the time we released Evolve. And Symphobia just changed the landscape of like composing really quickly. At that point, so I was predating Evolve by a few years because like Evolve came out in Contact, whatever it was, 4 or 5. So Contact had kind of developed, but there weren't dozens and dozens, if not, at this point, hundreds of like developers out there. It feels like there's a developer on every corner now. It's like every day I see new ones, and I'm like, wow. And I sometimes wonder where they're getting the resources to record all their assets. I'm not sure, but
they seem pretty. I get quite a lot of reach outs from these small companies to check their stuff or demo or review, and they seem. They're usually very lean operations. It's like one person or just a couple, and I think most of them seem to go for a very like narrow thing, which is smart because it allows you to, make it faster and also make it more coherent because you need to sell it to people, and to sell you need to convey what it is successfully.
Less moving parts.
Yeah, but they tend to be like quite specialized, stylized specifically in a certain way. But yeah, I don't know. Many of them seem to have like a small studio set up, and they have a mic, and then they record a cello, and then they process the cello in a number of ways, and then it becomes like some kind of a library.
And more power to them. I would never fault or try and diminish anybody's efforts to do something creative and positive and make a mark. But the one thing I will say is, like, thinking back to when we started, when we launched our first instrument, and the progression from there, and what we have been able to learn, and how we've grown and went from a very shoestring kind of existence in terms of planning and execution to a very refined and very clear goal-based execution, and what that delivers in terms of the results. And you have to start someplace, right? And I love the fact that there's more people doing it in one sense, but they do tend to say, the waters get muddy when there's too many, dirt clods in the pond, right? And it doesn't mean that there's not good quality. It just means, how many different ways you want to present the same thing or go after the same sound. We always had this internal discussion about Damage 2 over the years, because we kept seeing what Damage 1, what our original Damage product did on the marketplace, and how people responded to it, not just in terms of the user base, but the developer base who tried to go after that kind of kitchen sink percussion approach, and the once again, Neil, Street Fighter of percussion that Damage was. And we waited almost 10 years to unleash the sequel for it, because we wanted to wait until we were good and ready to make sure that we could outdo what Damage was. And we saw a lot of people try to, one-up Damage, and I will not take anything away from what anybody else did, but the thing that made Damage so special is were the team behind what the product was. It was the efforts of the people behind the product, and that's what goes into making something special. And so like, I don't know where things are going. I mean, eventually it's like AI is going to be making virtual instruments, for all I know, if not already. And what are we going to do? I don't know. Keep doing what we're doing, hopefully. It's just, everything's changing, and it's like, I can't necessarily determine how things are going to change. But I think there's a saying out there: you either you latch on, you got to hold on to the change, or you're going to get dragged, right? So who knows where it's all going at this point?
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. What's really interesting about AI, to me, at least at this stage, is the curation aspect, because AI can generate a bunch of really good quality outputs, but to know what to put in as an input is a different thing. And that takes perspective, that takes experience, that takes knowledge. Obviously, you might be able to also prompt the AI to represent those qualities as well. But to build that prompt, you also need to have the experience and the wisdom and the taste and everything, the skill. So it'll be interesting. I'm not sure it will change much necessarily for you, even if you know, let's say Heavyocity used AI tools to create sounds. A sound is not yet a usable sample library. Like, much of what a sample library is your vision and taste and skill and expertise put into this kind of a package.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still that hurdle to overcome. You at least have to be very good at prompting and knowing these AI tools to build something like that, even if you are using AI to generate the source sounds.
No question. And we've had a lot of discussions about AI here, just kind of surface discussions about where AI is going and what we're seeing. And we've noticed that in terms of certain types of productions, AI does a really good job. And then other types of productions, other types of musical applications, AI just does not have it. So to your point, Markus, I do believe that there's still a nice window of opportunity for us to continue to nurture our creative ideas here at Heavyocity, and the things we have in the works we're already that we're not turning back on. There's a few projects we have in the wings that we're very excited about that will, some things, you think about and go, oh, is this going to do okay? Yeah, I think it'll be okay. And then there's other things where you just really get this a heightened sense of anticipation, because what you are working towards is something, it's not that anything isn't less special. It's just you tend to gravitate towards certain types of projects that you feel are a little more rewarding in terms of what you are putting into it. And sometimes that comes from more creative source creation, in terms of like taking an emulated source and turning it into something else. Sometimes it just has to do with how you were able to capture a source and what you were able to do. A lot of techniques I'm using now in terms of recording sources is done with a different approach, using contact mics versus a couple of really high-end quality, ribbon mics to capture something. Using frequency isolation to milk the best part of a raw source and dividing the source into its actual timbral shifts in the harmonic spectrum to draw something out of that sound. It's almost like pulling a sound out of a raw sound. And there's some really cool things that I've been working on that I can't go too much into detail with, but just techniques that I'll probably share with people through our YouTube channel and whatnot, because I think there's some really cool creative sound design applications that are sitting right there in front of everybody, and most people don't even realize it. It's like what you can do with certain tools that is so, it's not, again, not rocket science, it's not difficult, but it just takes ingenuity and thought and creativity and experimentation. So, yeah. What was the question again?
No, I actually wanted to touch on briefly on NAM because I've never been there. I wanted to go. So first of all, is it worth going to NAM? And secondly, if you do go there, do you have any recommendations on what you're doing? And especially if you work in the industry to whatever capacity, do you have any kind of tips on
NAMM.
that?
Oh, we called it the land of misfit toys. NAMM, we haven't been in probably, I don't know, 10 years or so. We haven't been in a long time. So I don't have a good baseline on what it is now, but when we would do the show, it was kind of like this time warp in a way, because a lot of people who would show up are kind of dressed in 80s rock garb, and it was like, it's a really cool who's who of the industry, of the music industry, because you'll have artists, you'll have bands, you'll have people, endorsees of this company, that company. You'll see anybody and everybody at a NAMM show, because it's not just for musicians. There's people who love music, and I know a bunch of people who go every single year to NAMM, and they have nothing to do with the music industry. They just love going there and checking out the stuff, because they just have a fondness for the gear, and then they like seeing the people. You'll be able to run into a lot of famous faces in the industry of music and recording at NAMM every year. As far as going now, I'm sure it's still fun, and it's easy to get a badge if you know somebody. I'm pretty sure you can go, general public, you can buy a badge to get in, I think, right? I'm not sure.
I had no idea.
It like, going and being part of the show is like, when you look at the expense of it, and just, it's on the other side of the country for us, and we did it a few times, and we realized, like, it's a good investment out of the gate, and it got us some good exposure. And then we shifted our resources to other places instead of NAMM. And some companies we were friendly with and who were bigger than us actually pulled out of NAMM as well, because they just didn't see the return on the investment for it. But that doesn't mean that it's not a great opportunity to go. Like, it's great for people who want to go see gear, obviously. That's why it's there. It's there to celebrate, what everybody's selling and what everybody's doing. And it's, there is a lot of networking that goes on there. I mean, our second NAMM, I think our second NAMM, it's where we met Robert Dudzik, who's a very dear friend of the company, and a lot of people know Robert Dudzik, and he's just an incredible field recordist and sound designer. He's worked with us on a number of projects, and he's kind of part of the extended family here, and a very close personal friend of mine. And if it weren't for NAMM, I never would have met. We never would have met Robert. So you never know who you're going to run into there or meet. And he was just running around with his CD of his sounds and his music, and he's like, "You got to listen to this," and he's like, and the rest is history, like, known him for years now. But going to NAMM is be fun to go to once, take your kid to Disneyland. It's right down the street too.
Yeah, we'll have to see. The world is a bit crazy right now. So it's,
to put it mildly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'd probably want the global situation to stabilize maybe a bit before traveling a lot. Not that we can't really afford it anyway right now. And
totally. I hear you there. I mean,
yeah, but nice. But I do love I do love the US, and there are a lot of places there that I'd love to visit and see, and actually people I'd like to see, because I've made some friends on the internet over the years, and haven't actually met them in the flesh. But
well, if you ever, whenever it is that you make that trip over, you could stop here and spend a few days, and then make your way out west for NAMM or whatever. Doors are always going to be open for you here, Markus, for sure.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, that would be super nice.
Yeah.
Do we have time for a few more things,
sure.
or do you need to?
Yeah.
Because
No, I can hang out for a little while longer. Yeah.
cool, awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to touch on your sort of like, I guess I don't actually like this term, so I'm not sure why I keep using it, but work-life balance. I mean, your balance in life as a whole, because you obviously you are a parent and you're a part of this busy company,
Yeah.
and that work is also, it's technical, it's creative. I know you work out, you try and take care of yourself
Yeah.
health wise.
Hmm.
How first of all, has it always been like that? Have you always had balance, or is it something you that's sort of newer to you? And how do you find the whole thing? Like, what has been the most difficult thing about it? And yeah, any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah. So just a quick, I'll try and make it quick. It's never quick with me though. So balance is something that I strive for, especially now. And I always had a work ethic, as we talked about very early on. I had this tenacious work ethic, and I always tried to stay in good shape. And I was a long distance runner for years, and I ran marathons and had a great work life balance. And this is before my wife and I started our family and had our son. But then, when COVID hit, I just got into this weird place where, I developed plantar fasciitis and I couldn't run, and I just got kind of lazy and I put on a bunch of pounds. And then in December of 23, I was actually, and this is something I really don't have any issue talking about because it's important to get the word out. I was diagnosed with a pretty serious heart condition in December of 23. And I had to make some really important life changes, mainly, my diet and exercise, and just eliminating the things in my life that were going to threaten the condition. The condition's, technically it's known as an ascending aortic aneurysm, and it's where your heart grows in size. Your aortic artery, where it turns around, it grows bigger than it should be. And if left untreated and dealt with, then it can lead to really serious consequences and will require surgery. So back in December 23, I was 30 pounds heavier than I am now. I went on a major diet. I started exercising. To this day, I work out probably 4 or 5 days a week, and I'm in probably better shape than I was 30 years ago today. And that's just attributed to the wake-up call I got when I was diagnosed. And I'm happy to share that I have to get scans every 6 months to see where things are with the part of my aortic artery, so that to make sure it's not growing any larger. And the good news is it's not supposed to shrink at all, but it has shrunk a couple millimeters, which is very, very rare. And my cardiologist said that it doesn't normally occur, but when that does happen, it's a sign that you're doing everything the right way. And part of that's just like a healthy balance of trying to reduce stress and being active and putting good things into my body, not bad things. But then, trying to, again, work is, there's a lot of pressure that comes with what any creative does. And I think that's something that you have to really mitigate. You have to find ways to channel the stress and the pressure into a place where it's manageable. And that comes through various techniques, whether it's just taking yourself aside and taking some deep breaths and slowing down and it's okay, I'm fine, I'm right here, sometimes I get really frustrated when I'm working and I just something's not going right. It's like, take yourself out of the moment, take a pause and just relax, take a deep breath, go outside, walk around the block. But in terms of the larger balance of life and juggling and working, and I commute, and my commute is like the worst thing. Like I hate my commute, but I'm much better with it since I've been able to really see things for what they are. It's like, is this really a big deal? No, it's not. It's just, it's just an annoyance that you will endure and get through and not have to worry about after you get through it. But the balance can be difficult because every day is there's something different happening. And then the world around us where everything's going on and we're concerned about that. And we can't really control what's going on in the world. So we can do a degree in our own lives control what's going on. And that's what's really important. So for me, the maintaining a balance and making sure I'm present in the moments of my life is really the crucial, the biggest tools to be aware of where you are. Don't just walk through life and just walk through life blindly. Be in the moment, because another thing that I say right after I say time takes time is like, you can't get time back. When you lose time, if something just passes you by, you can't hit the rewind button. You can't redo it. So the balance in my life revolves around making sure that every single day I focus on the day that I'm on, because you don't know what's around the corner. You have to be in the moment and present and deal with the adversities that you face on a level where it's like, hey, is this something I can deal with and control? Maybe, maybe not. If you can't control it, then, why are you letting it stress you out so much? And when you get a lot of stress and it builds up, leading to a heart condition, probably, or part of it, that's not healthy. So, for me, the balance has been like, getting my physical life back on track and exercising a lot and maintaining a level of just accountability to myself to make sure that I'm healthy in every way I can be. Because when you have a healthy body, it leads to, it helps a healthy mind and a healthy soul. And again, at the outset of this, I was talking about, just trying to be a better version of myself. And when I like the person I'm looking at in my mirror, that person that's looking back at me isn't going to be such a problem, So
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered the question or not.
No, for sure. Sure. Do you find it, because obviously when it comes to the Heavyocity stuff, there's a bunch of, technical stuff and maybe kind of mundane, tedious technical stuff, but there's also the creative stuff. So if we think about the creative work, do you find it difficult to turn that off when you need to attend to responsibilities or go back home? Is it like, because I know a lot of creatives struggle with this, because once their mind gets going, they can't stop, and that's why they do 15-hour days and then they sleep for 2 days.
So let me just make one thing clear. Like, I am one person in a company here, and we're not a big company, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact that they're like the core team that I would speak of is the 5 of us, myself, Neil, who I founded the company with, Ari, who's the third partner, and then there's 2 others, Luis Delias and Alejandro Zoria. The 5 of us are really we're like the 5 musketeers, and I have the utmost confidence in these guys. They're all like, I consider them all my equal, and they handle so much of various components to the heavy lifting in this company. It's not all on one person's shoulders, and it's divided up. So, and I am able to go home and unload, the burden of what is existing at work for the most part. But I also do have, it's not like I'm completely out the door when I leave, because there's things that you attend to during non-business hours just because you can. Like, over the weekend, I'll be working on making snapshots because I know I can do that, and I'm enjoying making snapshots for the product that we're working on that I can't wait for everybody to see, because it's a good one. It's a really good one. But the thing that you do is, like, the best way for me to disconnect is to take my phone and put it up on my dresser in my bedroom where I'm not, and get the phone away from me, and that way nothing from work will come there, and don't open my laptop, and at least get the decompression from being at work, and then check it later or whatever, because if you're always tethered to the technology, it's going to follow you around, and it'll end up haunting your dreams if you stay in it too much, you know. So having, like for me, having some family time, like I got home last night and I was able to really just connect with my wife and son. Had not a great morning, and then turned it around at the end of the day, and it was like, felt really just thankful that I have two people in my life that can draw me out of the pressures of my work and make me feel very whole, if that makes sense. Having love in your life is important, and love for yourself is important, and that comes with understanding who you are. And I think balancing the rest of your life begins within. You have to balance inside of yourself and realize that, for me, speaking personally, I'm not perfect, and I know that there's so many things I want to work on, and I will work on these things, but I also have to, I have to give myself a break. I'm doing the best I can. And when you're doing the best you can, you're making good effort in life, disconnecting from work shouldn't be as hard. But yes, if there's crunch times, if there's times when there's a lot going on, yeah, it may follow me home a little more. But it is important to separate and compartmentalize, because you don't want to be ruled by your career, and that's can happen really easily.
How have you found being a father? Like, how has that changed you? And also, I guess, relating to the creative work, has it? Well, I mean, I guess I'll let you answer that any way you want. Like, how have you found it, and how has that changed you?
Boy, that's a loaded question. My
Hey,
son,
you can take it anywhere you want.
No, my son, when he was really young, when he was a baby, it was like every day I would come home, I just had this elation, this little bundle of joy, and then I watched him develop into this little toddler and a little kid, and the inspiration that I got from my son, just a little ball of life, was it's this intangible, profound thing that I didn't really translate into what I was doing or what I was working on. It just filled my soul with a joy. And then, through the years of his development, I had bumps in the road personally for myself that just came out of being a father and realizing some of the things about my childhood that weren't so great with my own father. But my son was able to, not even knowing it, help me see the things that I needed some help with to work through, and he inspired me just by being to make sure that I could be that person in his life that he deserved, being my son, and the ability for me to see things clearly as a result of coming to terms with certain things in my life and then working on those things and having that reflection of, like, seeing my son now at 10, and the fact that, like, there's not a day that goes by. It's like we tell each other we love each other like 10 times a day. Like, I texted him when I was leaving work last night. I told him, I said, I love you very much, and I'll see you in a little bit. And he gave me a thumbs up, and he just texted back, I love you so much. And it's like, you can't bottle that stuff like that. Just there's nothing that matches the kind of gift you get from the love of a child. And I try not to get too emotional about it, because it's just like, it is a profound thing. And I've always thought that children are the biggest teachers in the world. They teach us how we are supposed to be, especially when they're innocent. They just want to be loved and give love. So so being a father, yeah, it's and I'm trying to paint a rosy picture. It's like, it's half of that, and it's half of, oh, my kid's a real pain in my rear. It's really difficult. and we go through a lot of ups and downs, and that's also part of the journey and the trail that is marked with a lot of interesting moments, and it makes for a good story. Like, life is not meant to be boring. It wouldn't be fun to be here if we didn't have those moments of adversity and the ways to define happiness. You can't understand happiness without going through struggle and conflict and the adversity. So children are a gift, and we have to embrace it, but we also have to grow just like our kids do. We have to grow as adults when our kids are coming up, because a lot of us are very self-centered through a lot of our lives, and then we realize, oh my gosh, it's not just about me. And I'm the first to admit, it's like, I went through life, it's about me. And then I had a son, and it's like, oh, it's not about me. So, yeah, I wouldn't trade it in for anything. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine life without them after they're here. And kids definitely expose and reveal everything about you. Obviously, people have varying degrees of attention that they want to pay to those revelations, but they definitely show you who you really are, and that can be tough, because obviously we're all flawed, and you don't want to be the worst version of you to the person who matters the most. And that's why it's so painful also being a parent. It's like you said, like the peaks of life come from that, but it's also super difficult because you're dealing with this crazy person, crazy little person who is being very, very difficult to deal with at times. And then you got to try and be an adult and manage not only their emotions but yours, and try and teach them, educate them simultaneously. And we're finite creatures with finite resources and skills and energy and everything. So
no questions. Yeah.
Cool. Well, going to the sort of last few questions. Talking about the future, what's next in store for you? I mean, I know you mentioned this upcoming library, so I guess that's going to be the very next thing coming out. But do you have, and this can be about anything, this can be about your personal future or Heavyocity's future. Is there something that sort of looms in the horizon in a good way?
Nothing that I'm allowed to really disclose as far as like company stuff goes. For me personally, it's just keeping things, steady. My son is reaching that age where I want to be a part of his life. I want to be in his life. I'm also continuing to pursue, a life of, really good health and fitness, so that I can be here for a long time for him and for my wife and for my friends, my people I work with, all that stuff. I have other hobbies that I love. I love pinball machines. I love amusement parks. I want to get out and travel more. But I also want to get back to, we haven't been in the heavy melody lane a lot, and we have been doing a little bit of a cover band here that's a little under the radar thing. We're doing a lot of tunes from the 80s, hair metal tunes as we call them, and we got, I don't know, like 12 songs now, something like that. We've been jamming once a week and have a singer, and we're having some fun with that. Maybe we'll figure out a way to pop a video up eventually, and maybe do a gig somewhere, and go back to my roots with the guys I work with here. So, but I think getting back to writing more music is a big thing on our list to start doing, because there's a lot of accomplished composers that fill the walls here, and we have a lot to offer in terms of our composition as a whole and individually. And I'm not just talking about myself, obviously. I'm talking about this company. Heavyocity wouldn't be what it is without the compositional chops that come within the walls here. Again, this is not ego. This is just I am just inspired by the people I work with on a daily basis, and I'm grateful to have this opportunity. Like, I don't take it for granted. Like, the hard work I've put into this has been matched by the hard work of everybody else, and that's a really wonderful thing. And where it's all going, anybody could tell you. I just, being at this point in my career where I'm a little bit on the older side, I guess. Who knows? I'd like to take it one day at a time, and as long as I still feel like doing this, I'm going to do this, right? And right now I feel like doing this, and it's good. And I know that we have a lot of really, really good things in the pipeline that we're working on, and that's to me that gives me that daily inspiration that is required. If you don't have something that inspires you to get in and give everything you have to what you're doing, then you need to reevaluate, take some inventory of what's going on. And, it hasn't always been that way. We have peaks and valleys where we're feeling great and not so great. And, right now we're trending up in what we're doing here, and a lot of good things going on. So, being a little vague about what I'm going to do, but it's hard to forecast, it's just, I'm kind of living in the moment these days.
Yeah, and that's also pretty important part of being a creative person. You wanna be structured so you get things done, but you want to have enough flexibility so that it doesn't begin to feel like a prison or like a typical sort of 9 to 5 kind of scenario, which
Right.
usually creates a lot of anxiety for creatives.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. What was I was going to ask something relating to that, but it slipped me. Okay, cool. But what is your definition of an artist?
Oh, my definition of an artist.
And this could be a definition. It doesn't have to be like a complete, all exhaustive thing. It could be like a specific perspective that you want to explore on the title.
Boy, I didn't even think about this question. An artist is it's a state of mind where you're drawing creativity out of a place you can't define. And that can be visual, it could be with sound, it could be music, it could be anything. I tend to look at art as a universal form in our world. Art can manifest itself in anything: food, a architecture, a painting, a song, landscape. I think something that is appealing. And an artist is from a pure definition, it's probably something along the lines of an artist is a creator of something that didn't exist before, right? Something that comes from within your soul that you're offering to the world, to the universe that wasn't there before, that you own and nobody else has a piece of it. But what you are providing for those who consume it, you're offering a opportunity to feel and take emotion in what you are presenting as your art. So I guess in that context, an artist is also it is an individual who can affect an emotional response in others, right? I think artist is a tough term, or it's a tough. I want to know what you think an artist is.
I'm always afraid of that. Well, I think what you touched on is a really central part of it, that I think artists go beyond the boundaries of known reality. So they basically go into the unknown. They see something that others don't see or pay attention to. And they bring that thing back and they put it in the form of their art. It could be music, could be visual art, could be a book or poem. And they bring it into the known world and people read it or listen to it and see it. And it expands reality as we know it. They bring something that we didn't see before. So that tends to be, that's one part of the core answers that I tend to give. And it's exactly what you said about, taking things from the unknown, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because otherwise it doesn't speak to us. If it's already something we know, then it doesn't move us. And that's exactly what art does. Art moves us because it's a revelation. It's a discovery. It's something that makes you go like, ooh, that's something new.
Yeah.
By definition, it needs to do that. Otherwise it's it's not art.
Right. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So artists. Yeah. We're all artists in a way, right? You can be an artist with your words, you affect people profoundly with your words, so.
Yeah. And that's another thing I say, that anything can be done artfully. And when you do something artfully, that's called artistry.
Yeah.
And I think, just like you said, I think art can be in anything. I think there's the art of business, for example. You can do business at a level that can be considered to be artistic, or you can play football, or should I say soccer, maybe? Well, why not American football as well? You can be an artist in that because you can make new connections, and I think I would say beauty is a big part of art.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and when you see someone, or martial arts, for example, you can see someone in a match and they're doing something extraordinary, and you go like, wow, that was amazing. And that you saw beauty in that. It was so balanced, so genius, so creative.
Sure.
That it elevated to the level of art. But and that's why art is maybe more about a way of doing something rather than what it is that you do. Because I can play the piano, but be just a pianist, like an instrumentalist, but not be an artist.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Couple more. We winding down here. Ready?
Yeah. We'll wrap up. If you could send a message to everybody's smartphone, it's gonna appear on the lock screen of people's smartphone, and it goes to everybody on the planet who has a phone.
Mm-hmm.
What would you send?
I would send a text that says, were you kind and caring towards every person you came into contact with today?
Nice. All right. Last question. If you, who would you like to see on this podcast as a guest?
Oh my goodness. If I was going to pull one off the top of my head, I didn't even think about this one. So I brought up Robert Dudzik. His story is amazing. So he might be a person to tap. He loves to talk just like me. He'd be a great one.
Yeah, I would love to talk to him.
I can hit him up and see if he'd be willing to do it for you for sure. I'll let him know. He's a great guy. And his story is amazing. So definitely a person to possibly look at.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Is there any social media links or a website or anything you want to direct people who might be listening?
Heavyocity.com is the URL for the company, and YouTube, I think /Heavyocity. You could put it in the
we'll
link.
Put it in the description. Yeah.
All the rest we'll put in the link description.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
And Instagram, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for taking the time. I know you got things to to be
Time to
actually
attend to
working
the
on.
business. Yes.
Yeah.
It was
Cool.
great to chat with you, Markus, and I
Likewise.
really appreciate the opportunity.
No, it's pleasure is all mine, and thanks for taking the time. And yeah, means
All
a
right.
lot. So
Cool.
cool.
All right.
Well, I'll talk to you soon.
All right.